Good evening and welcome to tonight's City Council meeting. Information on how to watch, attend, and participate, as well as agendas, minutes, and recordings can be found at Broomfield's website at broomfield.org. The public may also participate in public comment either in person or by calling 855-695-3744 and pressing *3 to be placed in the queue for comment. Screeners will ask callers for their first and last name and the item the caller would like to comment on. And if you'd like to speak on more than one item on tonight's agenda for the callers, you'll need to press *3 each time to be placed back in the queue for comment. Public comment will be limited to 90 minutes total per item. The first 1 through 15 participants in the queue have 3 minutes to speak. The next 16 through 25 have 2 minutes, and if time remains, the next 26 plus participants have 1 minute to speak. For our hard of hearing residents present, we have wireless headsets available in the back of the council chambers through our AV team. They really help. The City Council regular meeting is called to order. Councilmember Ward is excused and a quorum of the council is present. Will everyone please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. In an effort to keep order for tonight's meeting, I ask council members to limit their comments to 3 minutes, no 5. If council members are given an opportunity to speak for a second time on an item, they should limit their comments to 2 minutes. We'll plan on a 10-minute break at approximately 8 p.m. We will begin with council's review and approval of this evening's agenda. Council may add or remove items from the consent agenda, or council may revise the order of business for the meeting. Does any member of the council have any comments or questions regarding this evening's agenda? Are there any objections to this agenda being approved? Seeing none, the agenda is approved. The first item under petitions and communications this evening is a proclamation declaring June 12th, 2024 as Bal Swan Children's Center Day in Broomfield. Will the representatives from Bal Swan Children's Center here to accept the proclamation please come meet Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf at the podium. Thank you all for joining us this evening, and we're grateful you can be here this evening to accept the proclamation in honor of the 60th anniversary. I will summarize the proclamation, and then I'll turn it over to the representatives for comments. The proclamation states that Bal Swan Children's Center grassroots initiative started in 1963 to create an educational space for children with disabilities. The center's articles of incorporation were signed on June 12, 1964, making June 12, 2024, its 60th anniversary. When the Children's Center opened, it was home to 15 students. Today, there are over 180 students. The teachers create an educational home where children can thrive in their learning and maximize their individual strengths. The Bal Swan Children's Center is currently planning to build a state-of-the-art center serving families and children from infancy through 5th grade. Inclusive education will be at the core of the school's offerings. This endeavor will secure the center's mission to build a social-emotional foundation and nurture an inclusive learning community where children and families grow and belong and help Broomfield lead the country in authentic, individualized, inclusive education. Therefore, as mayor, I hereby declare and proclaim June 12, 2024 as Bal Swan Children's Center Day in Broomfield. On this special 60th anniversary, I'd like to pause and honor Marlene Politzer, the school's founder and first teacher who joined in 1965 and later served as the school's director from 1970 to 2004. Marlene's tireless efforts and contributions to the school were truly invaluable, and it's important to recognize her tonight. So I would like to let our representatives introduce themselves and make some remarks.
Hi, my name is Debbie Kuntz. I am the Executive Director of Bal Swan Children's Center and leading this initiative in our growth. And my biggest remark is, thank you, Mayor. You really encapsulated everything. Thank you. But what I want people here to know is Bow Swan Children's Center was born out of an unmet need in our community. We started to meet the needs of our communities, and that's what we continue to do today. So we invite everybody to participate in our efforts. We are really serving you and your children and your grandchildren.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Korb. I'm the president of the board at Bell Swan Children's Center. And I just want to thank you and you for your tireless and ongoing commitment to this amazing place. We all know when we have happy children, we have happy families. We have happy families, we have happy, thriving communities. And this is an amazing place that builds happy families and happy children. So thank you for your continued investment in our amazing school.
Thank you very much. Well, we allow public comment on all agenda items. So if anyone would like to speak on this item, the podium's yours. Just introduce yourself, name and neighborhood, and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
My name is Janet Sund. I live in Westlake. And my family, my parents, my nieces and nephews, brothers and sisters live in the Birch area by Birch Elementary. And when my nieces and nephews who are in their 40s now, when they were 4 years old, 5 years old, my mother knew about what Marlene did because she did that just 1 year before I was born. And we have been in Broomfield since I was born in '61. And my mother knew how important education was and how important it is to not be afraid of other people who are different from you. And so we didn't have a lot of money, but Marlene allowed scholarships for all of my nieces and nephews. And as they went through the program, she did the same for all the, probably, I would say 10 babysitting kids out of 40 kids that my mom took care of, because my mom pushed the parents to put them in that school. And those kids to this day will go up to anybody in a wheelchair. They'll go up to anybody who can't talk or is missing a limb or anything. And they just put their arm around them and love them. And it's thanks to what Marlene did and her efforts and what she knew needed to happen. It made such a difference in our community and in my family's lives.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Anyone else?
My name's Travis Girard. I live right there in the Northmore neighborhood. I have 2 kids. I moved here in Broomfield, was it 2020? My oldest just recently graduated from Ball Swan last year. My youngest is now attending there. And I would just say that I feel super fortunate to have fallen into that community and to been able to have my kids attend there. Just the inclusiveness, the welcoming, the foundation that Ball Swan has provided both of them for their lives moving forward. I would wish it for anyone in my community, in Broomfield in general. So I'm thankful, and I feel super fortunate, not only to be part of the Ball Swan community, but to be part of the Broomfield community in general. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? All right, we'll go to council comments. Does council have any comments? Councilmember Henkel.
Thank you, Mayor. So happy to celebrate with you all tonight and just really appreciate all of the efforts of other people being here as well and speaking up. I particularly want to speak to this inclusiveness of the Ball Swan community. Even though I can't ever make the Ball Swan gala every year, I have to have a swim meet. I will say that I have enjoyed the community that it brings, particularly for our refugee kids. And I've really appreciated the amount of effort that you all and your staff has taken to really make applications to Ball Swan accessible and then also funding to Bal Swan accessible. And we find all different kinds of programs that support our refugees. And I've just been really impressed with how much you've supported just newcomers into Broomfield. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Councilmember Delgadillo.
Thank you, Mayor. Hello, good to see you again. I'd be remiss not to mention that I appreciate you all being here, and I have gladly joined the founding board of the new charter school, which hopefully we will get through soon. So I just wanted to jump in and say I appreciate you. I appreciate all you do. I'm very happy to support your efforts and support all you do. And I look forward to seeing how Bal Swan continues to transform the lives of children in Broomfield and surrounding areas as we go forward. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to echo everything that's been said. You all are amazing and do amazing work. My wife went to Bal Swan when she was a kid, and now our second child is about to finish it out this summer and start kindergarten in the fall. So the work that you do for the kids, the diversity that provides them access to that they don't always get in other places. So it's amazing. You do amazing work, and thank you. And I look forward to the Bal Swan Ball every year. That's the highlight of my year.
Thank you
Thanks.
very much. Councilmember Wynn.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to emphasize again, thank you so much for being here and being recognized to the Broomfield community. I had an opportunity to visit and tour the facility, I think roughly a year ago with the governor's team and Lieutenant Governor's office in my dual role. And again, it was an amazing experience. One of my close friends works at the school as well. So there's a lot of Broomfielders who take a lot of these opportunities. And again, I have to emphasize that early child development is very important, and you serve a very strong community that really needs that help. So thank you so much.
All right. Any other council member comments? Well, thank you all for joining us this evening and for the important work you do. Congratulations on your 60th anniversary. Next, we have a presentation from the Advisory Committee on Environmental Sustainability, also known as ACES. Will the ACES committee members please come to the podium and share your presentation? Hello.
Hello. Good
Thanks for
evening.
coming.
Yes, thanks for having us. My name is Sean McKenzie. I'm the chair, the incoming chair of the ACES committee, and I'm joined by Michael as well.
Hi.
Yeah. So we just want to, first of all, say thank you, Mayor, and to the council for having the time and attention to go over what the ACES has been up to over the past year or so and give an overview of who we are and what we're doing. Next slide. Thank you. So ACES was formerly the Environmental Stewardship Advisory Task Force for those who are not aware, but now we go by the name of the Advisory Committee on Environmental Sustainability, or ACES for short. And it's really a forum for resident comment on the environmental stewardship issues. We provide comments and recommendations for improvements on Broomfield's current environmental stewardship policies, specifically related to transportation, energy, and zero waste. And we were founded or established in February of 2020. Slide, please. So again, the role that we play and what we do are our key functions. We comment and make recommendations to Broomfield's environmental sustainability policies, review the information on the existing programs, and recommend new environmental policies and programs, and provide a forum for constituent comment on these issues. Next slide, please. Thank you. So yeah, we're critical stakeholders in the programs and policies that are being implemented here in Broomfield, and we act as advisors to the city and county, providing expertise, input, and opinion on potential sustainability actions, sort of act as a liaison between the community and staff planning, making our recommendations to city council regarding those policy actions, and providing assistance where needed and amplifying the messaging. Next slide. Okay, as I said before, I'm Sean, the incoming chair, joined by Michael, who's the vice chair. And here we have a list of all the other, might I say, super passionate and knowledgeable and thoughtful members of the ACES committee who are trying to catalyze change here in Broomfield and make it the best city in the world. Yeah. So I'll turn it over to Michael. for our goals.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Next slide, please. So ACES supported the development of 2 long-range strategic plans for Broomfield, namely Greenhouse Gas Reduction Plan and the Zero Waste Plan. In 2020, the Broomfield City Council adopted the resolution number 2020-169, which laid out ambitious greenhouse gas emission reduction targets. These are short-term and long-term targets, which is seen here, and they're for the city and county of Broomfield's municipal buildings as well as community-wide. So following the adoption of this resolution, the sustainability staff, along with the help of many additional groups and departments, developed the city and county of Broomfield's first greenhouse gas emissions reduction plan, which was made public in early 2022. And the plan represents recommendations on how to achieve long-term sustainability goals alongside sustainable program and policy development and implementation. What the plan did not do, however, was provide information on where our current emissions from the municipal side or the community-wide side stand. So the next step in this process was to gather emissions data for the most recent full year, 2022, and compare that against emissions from a baseline year to understand our progress toward those targets. Next slide, please. And then in February of 2020, the City Council and the City and County of Broomfield on a path towards zero waste with the passage of Resolution 2020-65, adopting zero waste as a guiding principle and supporting the creation of a zero waste plan. The resolution establishes zero waste as a priority for the city and county and identifies waste diversion goals of 50% diversion by 2025 and zero waste by 2035. In addition to the 2 long-range strategic plans I just mentioned, ACES has participated in the energy performance contract for municipal buildings. We've assisted in the design of the city contracted residential waste hauling program. We provided input on the B-cycle study, provided input on the construction, deconstruction, and demolition program, and participated in the regional commission and board collaboration planning group. We have participated in community outreach and engagement activities at Broomfield sponsored events such as Brouhaha this past weekend. We've reviewed the following policy updates: landscaping code, the state energy code, electric vehicle parking ordinance, and tree preservation code. And the following, and these planning documents, the drought plan update and wastewater master plan review. Next slide, please. On the agenda so far for the remainder of the year are continuing to look at the construction, demolition, waste diversion, the city contracted residential waste hauling, Broomfield residential and commercial energy assistance programs, outreach and tabling at additional community events, electric preferred building codes if the council pursues this, comprehensive plan input with the TBD timeline, and there will likely be additional items brought forth by members and staff. Thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you both so much for being here and for providing us with an update. We will take public comment on this item and then questions and comments from council. So would anyone like to comment on the ACES presentation? I don't see anyone online. So next is questions, comments from City Council. And we have Councilmember Lim.
I wanted to thank this group for coming forward. We have a new leadership team in ACES, and they've been very enthusiastic about taking on their responsibilities. We had a great crowd they mentioned Brouhaha. We had a great crowd who was interested in the booth there, taking information on energy, house inspections, and we were giving away LED light bulbs from Excel and things like that. So we had a great interest at the booth. And what I found out that I didn't know from the sustainability coordinator, Alex Moore Van Dyke at the time, was that the sustainability department has the third largest circulation or enrollment in newsletters in Broomfield. So when you sign up for a newsletter in Broomfield, you can go to a website and see a long list of a lot of communications that the city provides. And Alex told me that sustainability is the third largest in circulation. So that's great. We are happy that the information and education is going out and there's a lot of interest. So thank you for the group's involvement in making that happen.
Thank you. Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for coming and presenting tonight. Your work is so vital to what we are doing as a community, the community goals that we have, not just on the outreach engagement with the community, but also on helping us to shape the policy that we're making moving forward. Sustainability is a vital, is one of the most vital things that we can do as a community, to help us all to have a good quality of life moving forward and climate change. So appreciate the work you do, and I look forward to continue working with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for your presentation. Thanks for being here tonight. This is something that we're kind of rolling out this year, which is each advisory committee comes before council and presents kind of what they're doing, and also puts a name to or a face to the names that we see on a regular basis. So thank you both for being here tonight. And I know there's members of the ACES committee out here in the seats as well. So thank you all for being here as well tonight. Can you tell me more about this Broomfield residential and commercial energy assessment program? Who might qualify, where we are in the process on that? I'm sure that our community would be interested in hearing more about that.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. Allison Harvey, Deputy Director of Public Works. We were just talking about this program at ACES last night, but the detailed answers, I won't put them on the spot to answer that for you. We had a program last year that we pilot tested where older residents and income qualified residents could qualify for free, I forget the word, the non-standard home energy audit. And so we're just beginning to roll that program out again. And we began this conversation with ACES to look at who will be eligible. So we don't have all the full details on that yet, but it's coming soon because we're getting that program going again. We started it towards the end of last summer, so it could, as we headed into winter and people are looking at their heating bills starting to rise, that we're able to get those audits out to the community.
And thank you for that. So with it being a pilot program this past year, do we have any metrics and kind of data on how that was utilized, what the effectiveness of it was? I assume because we're moving forward with it, it was effective. So I'm curious to find out kind of how it did this last year.
Sure. Was it 100, right? Households who participated? 49. Yeah. Okay.
And that's all, we budgeted for 49 and we received.
Right. Okay. So it was 49 households. Sorry, I had to phone a friend there behind me. 49 households who enrolled, and that's what we targeted with the pilot for budget reasons, if it's a weird number. But we did a lot of outreach. Alex and Garrett in particular were at the Healthy Hearts luncheon on a weekly basis and doing outreach at the senior center to make sure our older residents had priority access to the program. And there was good uptake and people who went through those auditing services. And it did include more than just an energy audit. Clear Result, who provides these, does on the spot improvements where they can with weather stripping and LED light bulb replacement and things like that. So
Great. Well, I hope that as this program continues, that we get a little bit more information on how effective it was, in terms of what the energy savings were for those residents that did participate in this past year, and look forward to hearing more about the program coming up. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Any other council member questions, comments? Well, thank you all for being here and for the service that you're providing to the community. We appreciate your thanks. Our final item under petitions and communications, staff information. Staff will present information regarding the 2024 Great American Picnic, scheduled to take place on Thursday, July 4th at the Broomfield Commons Park, starting at 5 p.m. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, and I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, community and council. Matt Gully, master of fun and Quan of our Great American Picnic. I can't believe it's that time again already. Mr. Gully.
You and me both. Good evening, Mayor, council members, and city manager. As Jennifer mentioned, I am the recreation superintendent for the city and county of Broomfield. I know you guys are used to seeing Kay Gazaway up here presenting. However, Kay retired in February, so you stuck with me for a little bit. However, before I go any further, I would like to introduce Jenny Morgan. She is our new community events coordinator. She's been with the city for 6+ years, and she moved into her new role in March. So very excited to have her on my team, and you are going to see a lot more of her in the coming year. Now to the fun. We are here tonight to invite council and the community to the Great American Picnic and Fireworks Show on the 4th of July at the Broomfield County Commons. It's a little over 3 weeks out. I know we usually come a little bit closer to the event. However, the way the council meetings fell, this is when we had to come. Thursday, July 4th at 5 p.m. is when the fun starts with inflatables, Nerf games, face painting, live music, food vendors, a bubble tower, and beer gardens. Beer gardens will be returning, and they will be hosted again by the Broomfield Chamber of Commerce. We'll have one on the west side of the main pavilion and one on the east side of the championship field. Both beer gardens will have different breweries, and different food trucks will be serving food at those beer gardens. So please make sure you visit both. We will have 13 food vendors spread out throughout the event, both at the beer gardens and at the main pavilion, to try and limit the wait time of lines that we saw a couple of years back. The bike parade will line up at 5:30 p.m. at the South Red Pod, and the parade starts at 5:45. It'll be led by 2 of Broomfield's finest bike parade officers. We will be inviting the mayor to kick off the bike parade again this year. Everyone of all ages is invited to decorate a bike or a scooter or a stroller and take a lap around the park with us. We have a great musical lineup this year. The 17th Avenue All-Stars will start us off at 6 p.m. with an all-vocal band performing their creative renditions of top 40 hits. At 7:15 p.m., Thumpin' will take the stage and perform a repertoire of songs that spans 5 decades of funk, soul, and R&B until about 9:15. Now we are hoping for good weather, at least no hurricane strength storms like we had last year. Took me about a full month to dry out. Clay's truck took about 2 months to dry out after I sat in it for a while. So right around 9:15, we'll assess the weather with our launch team and decide how the fireworks will go off. Weather always plays a big part in the event. So if wind or rain are a concern, the launch crew will delay up until 10:30 p.m. If we have not shot the fireworks by 10:30 p.m., we will cancel the show for the year. I do think we paid our dues last year with the weather, so I'm sure this year it is going to be a beautiful evening, clear, and we'll have a great fireworks display. Historically, we draw about 15,000 people to the event throughout the day, so you can imagine the parking lots at the County Commons will fill up quickly. Accessible parking will be available in the west parking lot near the main pavilion. In addition, an ADA accessible shuttle bus with a wheelchair lift will be making the rounds from Legacy High School along with 4 other school buses. Everyone else is encouraged to utilize the shuttle service from Legacy High School, and the shuttle starts at 5 p.m. and runs until about 11 p.m., or at least until we get everybody back to their cars. You can meet the shuttles at the gazebo on the west side of Legacy's parking lot. One more important note that we started a few years back is that the main road into Commons will close at 8 p.m. to all traffic other than the shuttle service. This just dials down the congestion we have. Most of the parking lots are already full by that time, so just to limit traffic, we do that. Finally, I'd like to acknowledge and thank all the city departments that will be collaborating to make this event a success. Police, streets, parks, recreation, facilities, health department, communications, emergency management, North Metro Fire, I'm sure I missed like 6 more, but pretty much the entire city is involved in this event and we cannot pull this off without all of them. So I turn that back over to council.
Thank you very much, Matt, and so nice to meet you. Welcome to, well, you've been here, but we're glad you're in the role. We do take public comment on this item too, so if anyone would like to speak on the Great American Picnic, now's the time. Council questions and comments then? Anyone? I think you covered it all, Matt. Thanks, y'all. All right. Oh, sorry, I missed you.
No, you're fine. I was a little slow. I think we need a kickball game though between council and staff.
Kickball.
Yeah, because we used to do softball. Just thought I'd throw that out there. Maybe not this year. And Abby, you're always invited back. Yeah, I don't know, just something fun in the future, not this year necessarily.
Councilmember Hinkle, are you sure?
Have you seen me run, my friend? You haven't seen me
That
kick, which is
sounds
a
like-
good thing.
That
It
sounds like
benefits me.
somebody threw down the gauntlet, doesn't it?
Duly noted for next year.
Okay,
you.
next year sounds better. I'll train. Did you have something to add, Clay?
No, did you see Mr.
just
Shuck
gonna
come
say-
running down here thinking something additional on the plate? I think not.
Yeah, I was waiting for a city attorney to chime in on that or along with risk management. I guess we'll have to check into that before we look at a game next year. So.
Well, thank you, Clay, and thank you, Matt and everybody else. We're looking forward to it. Now, we're at council member reports. Does any member of council have any reports or updates this evening? Councilmember Lim.
Councilmember Anderson and I attended the Colorado Communities for Climate Action Annual Retreat yesterday and today. And we will be submitting a report, which would be available on the public council page as required by our travel funding. But I just wanted to mention there were about 4 themes. The themes were climate resilience, local control, emerging technologies, and workforce development. So we learned a lot at the conference and will, as I said, submit a formal report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Marsh Holshan. Oh, sorry, Councilmember Anderson. I feel like the numbers switched or I read it wrong.
Either way. Okay, thank you. And in addition to the retreat, I also want to just share that the Mayor Pro Tem, hopefully we won't providing an update on this, but Mayor Pro Tem, Councilmember Marsh Holshan and I attended the Adams 12 5-Star Classic fundraiser for Adams 12 5-Star Education Foundation last week. I'm not sure how we scored, not amazingly, but I just want to share that this was like an amazing opportunity that we had to build greater relationships and our partnership with Adams 12 organization through the district and beyond, as well as staff, council members, and commissioners throughout the Adams 12 communities. And specifically, some staff from Adams 12 shared appreciation. I might get this a little bit wrong. They want to share appreciation to Broomfield sustainability staff for their help on some grant funding that helped them with their composting at a couple of their schools, and also invited us. They're super excited about Thunder Vista, which is CHIP certified, which is a green building rating system. So it's like one of these energy efficient buildings, and they would love to give us, staff, council, whoever, a tour of that building sometime soon. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Marsh Holshan.
Thank you, Mayor. I did attend the Top Golf tournament. It's the one time a year I golf, so probably didn't do too well in the scoring. This morning I attended the Chamber of Commerce Coffee and Conversations meeting that they hold every month. I think it's once a month they do on Tuesdays at Ziggy's Coffee on 120th in Sheridan, which is in Ward 1, which is nice. It was a good conversation. There's probably 5 or 6, maybe 8 business leaders that showed up. Conversations regarding informal, but regarding tax policy and development things. So that was a good conversation. And then just a reminder for the council colleagues is that next week will be the Colorado Municipal League annual conference up in Loveland. I am currently serving on the executive board for CML. My term ends this June, so I am running for another term. There's 4 people running for 3 seats in our category. So I'm really hopeful that I'll be reelected. So if any of my colleagues are up there, I'll have flyers and stickers for you all to hand out. So
Sounds
that's
good.
it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Henkel.
Thank you. I'm looking for a candy, Councilmember Marshall. We all know we need candy at those things. Appreciate it. Just wanted to say two things. I attended the CCI conference in Colorado with our fellow commissioners all across the state. I will have my written report. It's already up to 2 pages. It might be 3 pages long, and I will give you the gist of it when I turn it in. And then the second thing too, as chair of the Metro Area County Commissioners, I just want to remind fellow council members to fill out the forms that were sent out by Dr. Cog's staff. We are trying to elevate the top 3 issues within the area and then really engage with our state legislators come September in the off season. So please fill out those surveys and I appreciate all of your participation. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Any other council member reports? Well, I have to give a shout out to the Broomfield Farmers Market, which opened today for its 14th season. In case you didn't know, it's at the Holy Comforter Episcopal Church. And they have some new features, including a beer garden and more vendors. I was really surprised to see it so full, like before pandemic full. So it looks like it's back and bigger than ever. So you guys should go check out all the new food offerings and drinks and all the new vendors. So we have to get the word out. And that's all I have. We'll now proceed with public comment for general items. This is an opportunity for the public to comment on matters other than the items already listed on the agenda. So if there's anyone who would like to be heard on matters not on tonight's agenda, please come to the podium, state your name and neighborhood for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Everybody's here for a purpose. Okay. I hear ya. There's nobody on the phone that I see for this. So there are no scheduled items under reports, although we just heard a few. Manager Hoffman, do you have a report?
I do not, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Rogers, do you have a report?
No, Mayor, thank you.
All right, thank you. Next is council's consideration of the consent items. The clerk will read all of the consent items by title, and there'll be one opportunity for public comment and council questions and comments. Will the clerk please read agenda items 6A through 6D by title?
6A, approval of minutes of the May 28, 2024 regular city council meeting. 6B, resolution 2024-70, approving an amendment to an intergovernmental agreement with the Colorado Department of Transportation through the 2020 through 23 Transportation Improvement Program for the State Highway 7 Preliminary and Environmental Engineering. Resolution number 2024-71, approving an intergovernmental agreement for the Colorado Highway 7 Priority 1A pre-construction 2023 through 25 Transportation Improvement Program local funding share. 6C, resolution 2024-54, authorizing and approving the Scientific, Cultural, and Facilities District funding allocations for the 2024-25 funding cycle. 6D, resolution 2024-85, approving amendments to council procedures, rules of order regarding rules of decorum.
All right, thank you very much. We'll now proceed with public comment, starting with in person. If anyone would like to be heard on these items, please come to the podium. Check online. Oh, no one's on the phone. All right, so next is council member comments and questions. Does any member of council have any questions or comments on these items? Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf.
Thank you, Mayor. So just appreciation to the residents of Broomfield and actually the residents of the FCFD district. It's your sales portion of your sales tax that goes to provide the funds for the Scientific and Cultural Facilities District and the amount that Broomfield receives from that. So thank you all for your contributions through your sales tax. This goes to a lot of great events that we hold here locally throughout a lot of Broomfield organizations, but also our arts and history and cultural team. And you all do a great amount of work. And so thank you to the FCFD and thank you to our arts team.
Thank you, Councilmember Nguyen.
Thank you, Mayor. The Mayor Pro Tem kind of stole some of my thunder. I also want to give a huge shout out to the Arts Committee folks over in the back there, including city staff, including the chair as well and the vice chair. So again, emphasize, thank you so much for making sure that Broomfield is on top of its arts. And I just saw earlier some arts being installed outside of, the building, and it's incredible. So excited to see what else you guys do and happy to support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other council member questions or comments? Well, I just have to echo my colleagues. I looked at a list of recipients and I'm so excited about all this exciting programming and performances that are going to be coming to Broomfield in our schools and our auditorium. So thank you all so much for your work on this. So we actually have to do a motion on this. Before asking for a motion, I want to remind everyone that item 6B contains intergovernmental agreements which require 2/3 approval of council. Is there a motion by council that the recommendations contained in the staff reports for the consent items be approved? Councilmember Leslie.
I move the resolution be approved.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Nguyen.
Seconded.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Council, please cast your vote electronically. We have to wait for it to come up. New system. There it is. Wow, that was quick. All council members have entered their vote and the results will be displayed on the screen. And that passes unanimously 9-0. Thank you all very much. Moving on to action items. The first item under action items this evening is a public hearing and council's consideration on third and final reading of proposed ordinance number 2219 regarding water use and drought restrictions. This is our first third reading. I'll now declare the public hearing open. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Thank you, Mayor. And Director of Public Works, Ken Rudd, is making his way down to the podium for a brief one-page.
It's not just the third reading, it's like
Third
the,
reading.
I don't know, sixth meeting about it.
Yeah, it
But
is.
who's
It's
counting?
important. Mr. Rudd.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem Council and Manager Hoffman. Ken Rutt, Director of Public Works. I'm here to once again present staff's presentation on the drought ordinance. And tonight we're going to just talk a little bit about just the amendments that came through on the second reading. And the first one was under section 1336.017, referencing the administrative fines, moving that from an administrative process into the code. And what that does is it sets up between section A through H, all the processes, the steps, the emphasis on public education and the appeal process. And then the second major amendment was in 1336-050J1. This is under the drought condition 3, which is our most severe drought response. And that added the restriction for not washing personal vehicles and boats at your home residence, still allowing commercial car washes if they have recycling operations. And then the third one, which I forgot to put on the presentation, which is the council agreed not to increase the drought penalties. That was under 1336.060 under the enforcement section. Next slide. One of the things that staff and council agree that the communication of the new provisions in the drought ordinance and the emphasis on our need to conserve our water and to ensure that our water supply can meet our demands, which is part of the watering cycle. So the first step that if council continues to decide to approve this ordinance tonight, we'll be sending out a postcard about the irrigation best practices and the new requirements, emphasizing the cycle soak method. And then that will be mailed out to all single family residents by the end of June. We're working with our communications department to, this is what you see on the screen is what we sent out last year, and we're looking at doing some updates to this postcard. Next slide. And then the rest of 2024, we are looking at sending out information about the updated drought code and how that will be integrated into our existing communication programs about water conservations. Messages will be included on our social media outreach, a new webpage on the updates describing requirements and resources to support the implementation. Will be updates to our watering tips webpage. The code updates will be included in upcoming newsletters from Public Works and Sustainability. Public Works will participate in the Broomfield Days with posters, handouts to provide educational outreach. Continue working with communication team to plan additional actions to reach our HOAs and our commercial water users. Next slide. And then following up in 25, communicating the effective date of the ordinance of January 1st, 2025. We have planned additional communications to prepare our customers before the irrigation season begins. Our 25 communications will also include additional social media outreach, webpage updates to reflect the new requirements that are in effect, another postcard about the requirements, newsletters, participation in Earth Day events, again with posters and handouts, and then again outreach to our large irrigation users. So that summarizes the staff presentation for this evening.
Thank you very much for your brevity, Mr. Rutt. We'll now proceed with public comments, starting with in-person. If anyone would like to be heard on this topic, please come up to the podium, state your name and neighborhood for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes, please.
Roxy Jewel out of Luckmore. It would have been nice if you would have had the slides in the center cameras or in the center TV, so people like me could read the whole thing that you guys are presenting. Otherwise, it's not even good at all.
I'm so sorry about that. Can we fix that so that the slides are in the center monitors? I didn't know, I can't see it, so I didn't know.
Thank you, Ms. Jewel. We'll pull the screen out so that the community can see what's on the slides.
Okay, that's one quick fix. Okay, but we'll troubleshoot that. I do apologize. Go ahead, sir. Sorry about that.
It's okay. Good evening, council. John Ewalt, Pinnacle North. Keeping, as this is the third reading, I'll keep my comments just to the changes. I'm not sure I understand the reason for the administrative fee. People are already being charged. If they're not following the route restrictions, they're still being charged a charge on their monthly water bill. So what is the purpose of the administrative fee? It feels like it's adding insult to injury. And then also, if this is passed, along with the education materials that were presented tonight, would it be possible to provide education around how to measure precipitation from a sprinkler system? I know most people don't intrinsically know. I don't know how intrinsically know just how much water I'm getting from my sprinkler system at various points of the lawn. So understanding what the limits are and how to measure that would be very important. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? All right. Any questions from council? That's next. No? Oh, wow. Love that. Okay. Really?
I just want to.
So close.
I just want to give an opportunity for staff to answer the member of the public's questions. So there were two questions. There was one around the administration fee and what that goes to cover. And then also there was a question about the education piece around the level of precipitation that falls and what programs are available to help measure that.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Mr. Rutt?
We'll go with the second question first. The second question on measuring, yes, we can include that in our educational materials. That's a wonderful suggestion, and we will follow through with that. Our communication director's back there, so
I have no
she
idea
can help me
either.
do that. There's different techniques, simple things as much as taking a tuna fish can and sticking it underneath your sprinklers. And then you measure the volume that you accumulate in that tuna fish can, or any similar size can of that nature. But that's one way you can do it. The administration fee, I'm assuming we're talking about the fee that is applied during a drought condition. And we have additional costs related to the treatment. For example, our treatment costs, as the water supply becomes more restrictive, different water quality parameters become affected. Just a simple thing like turbidity in your water increases our costs. 1% increase in our turbidity in our water increases our chemical cost by 0.25%. And then if there's any raw water contamination, that is an additional 28% cost in our treatment chemicals. And then additionally, our backwash water cycles go from 80 hours between cycles to 10 hours between cycles. And that affects 100,000 gallons every time we have to backwash. So that's 800,000 gallons more per day that we won't have access to immediately, which also increases our electrical costs, increases staff time, and increases chemicals, and also increases our disposal costs.
Thank you very much for that clarification, Mr. Rutt. Any other council member questions? I should add, since this is third reading, no amendments are permitted unless council suspends its rules. So, any other questions from council? There being no further questions, the public hearing is closed. Next is council's consideration of proposed ordinance number 2219 on third and final reading. Will the clerk please read the proposed ordinance by title?
7A ordinance number 2219, amending certain sections of chapter 13 through 36 of the Broomfield Municipal Code, water use and drought restrictions.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve ordinance number 2219 on third reading and published by title? Councilmember Marsh Holston.
I move that ordinance 2219, effective January 1st, 2025, be adopted on third and final reading and ordered published.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Leslie.
I second the motion.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf.
Thank you, Mayor. So hopefully staff and council colleagues received my amendments. Just kidding. Just kidding. No, I believe it was last year that council was discussing an ordinance and there was an amendment that occurred on the second reading. And at this time, a member of the public suggested that probably there should be a third reading when there's a substantive amendment that occurs on the second reading. And so our Charter Review Committee also agreed with that. Council agreed with this as well. And now this rule is embedded in our council rules and procedures, which I think is a great rule moving forward. So it came into practice tonight, and I'm pleased to see that as there were some changes that were made on second reading, and here we have a third reading. So I appreciate my council colleagues and going and moving forward with this. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Anderson.
And this time around, I was looking more at the educational materials because we've already gone over this a couple of times. And I was just thinking if it's possible. And the direction people are moving, QR codes are so critical. Like on the postcard, just pop a QR code on there so people scan it and get right to this website, because I'm reading about Cycling Folk right now. And then also any educational materials, posters, whatever, just those QR codes are becoming pretty popular. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other council member discussion? Or questions rather? Seeing no further discussion, we'll move forward to the vote on ordinance number 2219. Council, please cast your vote electronically. All council members have entered their vote and the results will be displayed on the screen. And that passes unanimously 9-0. Thank you very much, Mr. Rutt, and to your entire team and staff for working on this for so long. The next item under action items this evening is council's consideration on second reading and a proposed ordinance number 2237 regarding 2 business incentive agreements. I'll now declare the public hearing open. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Thank you. And joining us this evening is Jeff Romine, Economic Vitality. And so we have our old title on there. At some point, we will solidify Mr. Romine's title. For the time being, however, business development and economist. Mr. Romine, walk us through this issue, if you would, please.
Thank you, City and County Manager Hoffman. Mayor Pro Tem and council members, you will note this is very similar to the last presentation that I gave last week on first reading. So rather than go through it in great detail, just to hit some of the summary points. The first slide, thank you, by the way, for jumping right to it. The first slide really focuses on some of the accomplishments we've achieved over the last 6 months to a year, including, as noted, the business attraction work that we've done, including site selector support, US 36 Collaborative, which was focused on health tech and that kind of work. Our Enhanced Broomfield program, which supports our local businesses by providing grants for them to expand, increase employment, and generate new sales opportunities and thus sales tax revenue. And finally, on this slide, I just wanted to point out again the business retention support activities that we've undertaken, several for the first time ever, including a Broomfield Business Week, which was accomplished roughly a month ago. That was the first time ever we've done a local program around Small Business Week. And so that was something that we wanted to initiate. It came as a follow through to several comments by city council members and something we wanted to just really engage our local community of businesses. And then also, I just want to also point out the restaurant guide, which is available. It is a QR code, council member. It's something that we decided to do. We were asked by different people, why don't you have printouts of this whole guide? And the whole point was, this is something you can easily check and look at, and it's also updatable. So as many people have noted, there's new restaurants coming into the community occasionally. The latest one on Highway 287 that I think a couple council members have already gone to, at least they've alluded to it and found that it's a very good outlet for lunch and or dinner at this point. So, and then finally, the Mayor's Business Forum, which is something that was held roughly a month ago and brought together business leaders from around the community and talked about legislative changes that might be affecting them and the community as a whole, and also received an economic update at that time. Next slide, please. Again, just for everybody in the audience, but also for people listening, we go through a very methodical manner when we talk about business support. We have very targeted industries that we have encouraged and continue to grow. These result in both increased employment opportunities, increase business to business opportunities, but also is focused on customers, consumers and residents. So that's where we focus on first-time dining, retail market gaps, and entertainment hospitality. We go through this methodical approach and starts oftentimes with an inquiry from the business or perhaps somebody that's representing them or the owner of the property or even just an organization. So as an example, 3 weeks ago, we were reached out by a business organization where one of their firms that they work with could no longer operate or wasn't going to be able to grow in another community to our north. They reached out to us and said, hey, they're interested in Broomfield. Why don't you give them a call and talk to them? And so those types of opportunities come from all types of different sources. We then meet with them individually, either Rachel or I or other staff. We meet with them and make sure there's an alignment of values and community commitment. We then go through and get specific information. We do an analysis to determine what the fiscal benefit would be to the city and also the economic and community benefits. And that's a very methodical manner. It's oftentimes a number of conversations and back and forth. Finally, that may result, and I say may because this is something we rarely do, but something that we do, may result in the decision that we may provide a fiscal a business incentive to the firm. That is done based upon particular criteria, and then that is proposed to the city county manager. If it's something that the city county manager supports, then we offer a tentative support letter. As a reminder to you all, that support letter is non-binding. It is something that we feel is the next step. It allows us to generate the agreement that we would then bring to city council for first and second reading. And that's what we're doing today. So that both firms have gone through this full process. In one case, Hugh is here, and I think we started the conversation, if I recall, about Thanksgiving. If I recall, I don't think there was snow on the ground, but my colleague, as many of you know, happened to be very pregnant at that point. And as we toured Hugh's facility, that was quite an interesting tour, because you're kind of like, make sure she can get through. So Rachel has now delivered, as you can tell. So it's worked out for all of us, including her family. Moving on, as many people know, I try to bring a little levity to every conversation.
Thank you.
Next slide, please. These are the existing business support agreements. They are separate from our development agreements, which are oftentimes with property owners and developers such as Mace Ridge and Flatirons Crossing. These are specifically with firms. Two of them have expired or are expiring, and we're finishing up the due diligence on those to conclude those agreements. And as you can see, the other ones that are currently pending, and those are the open balances upon those agreements that are still there. In some cases, the firm will not fully receive all of that money. In other cases, they do. And in fact, if we were to have increased the amount or increased the time, they would have received even more, because in some cases, they may have pledged 50 job creations and they may have created 150 jobs and generated far more taxes, property taxes, and sales tax. But this is when we wrote the agreements, and this is the resulting side of it as we sit today. Next slide, please. Tonight, we are here. I'm honored to be able to present two firms that are going through second reading for support. As many people know, LaBelle French Bakery opened up in the north side of Broomfield, just off Highway 287 in the King Soopers Center up there that many people are familiar with. It's the Merrimont Farm Shopping Center. They invested roughly $400,000 in the business. They had some additional expenses that were above and beyond what they expected. And so that's part of the reason that we determined that it makes sense to do a business support program here. They employ 15 employees currently, and they expect to maintain that level of employment. We are proposing, as the council will note in the attached agreements, that we provide up to 25% of the collected sales tax, up to a total of $30,000 over 2 years, and that would support the operation in Broomfield. And the direct fiscal benefit resulting from this particular agreement is estimated over the 2 years to be about $140,000. So as you can see, it's a little over 4 to 1 as a return. And Charles was here last time. I don't remember if I saw Charles walk in. Oh, okay. Julia, thank you, Chef. The chef is here tonight, and we'd be happy to answer any questions if the council has. So thank you, Chef, for being here. Next one then is Rachel, just make sure that I did this right, because sometimes I mispronounce things, as you all know. So Synaptic. Thank you, Hugh. Hugh is the founder, and I do this every time, and I don't know why. But anyway, this firm is located right now in one of our sister communities. They have grown to a point where it's ready for the next stage. They've already completed one round of financing. They're getting ready to do and undertake the second, and they'd be growing the firm. Hugh and his colleagues have have identified a location here in Broomfield and are finalizing the lease on that space with an option to expand. And then they currently employ 10, and they expect to grow about another 20 employees. Their current value of the equipment within the building or within the business is around $4 to $5 million, and they expect to grow and invest another $20 to $30 million investment over the next 5 years. What's interesting about this firm, it's basically a 3D printing operation with ceramics. Their primary clients are aerospace, health tech, and others. Hugh is here if you would like to get into more detail, but it is fascinating. And I just had a great time touring it because of what you have to do around 3D printing and how these things are being utilized in places now, including inside many individuals who've gone under surgery or other healthcare initiatives. And it also goes to space. In this particular case, we're proposing up to 50% of the use tax in order to build out the space, and then about 50% of the business personal property tax over the next 10 years. The estimated total benefit would not exceed $350,000. And in this particular case, they expect to exceed over $700,000 in tax revenue. So about a 2 to 1 return here. This also supports our community because it's a business to business operation. supporting some of our local businesses, some of our key businesses here in the community. And then also it is around manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, which was one of our targeted industry. I should have noted, obviously, that the French bakery is one of the reason for doing that. Also is the fact that it is a first in market business here in the community and provides additional hospitality and dining options here within the community. So with that, Mayor, I conclude, and Council, I conclude my remarks with the last slide, which just talks about the action that's before you, which is to approve both business incentive agreements. And then again, this just affirms the way that we operate and the way we do this work. So Mayor, at that, I conclude my presentation and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Romine and Ms. King. So now we have an opportunity for public comments. If anyone would like to be heard on this item, please come up to the podium and state your name and neighborhood for the record. Takers, next is council questions. Are there any questions from council? Councilmember Leslie?
Thank you, Mayor. No questions. I just want to say on behalf of Councilmember Nguyen and I, who serve on the council, we're on the Broomfield Business Council. We really, agree that these kinds of incentives are so necessary in such a competitive world, and to be able to attract both small businesses that are going to grow, businesses that fill needs and gaps in our community, is a very good use of these dollars. And as you've already pointed out, they bring back greater resources to the city and the county for all the effort that you make, much of which is really unknown by the public. As I mentioned last week, I'm so pleased that you made the effort to tell the larger story of what you and your team are doing. But we know that jobs here in Broomfield is a critical part of our overall strategy for building our healthy environment here. And so I just want to compliment you and your team on that work. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from council? All right, I just want to thank you very much again. There
And
being
Mayor,
no-
if I could,
Yeah.
both the chef and Hugh are here if council had any questions for them specifically.
Chef Renaud, thank you for being here. Would you like to say anything? No pressure, but yeah, okay.
Hello, everyone. I'm very proud to be here. It makes me feel the first time I landed in USA. That was 15 years ago, and America welcomed me open arms. And I'm also a resident of Broomfield, so he actually touched me that my voice is heard. Label is not just a business. We're definitely have a culture. We have a lot of professional behind the scene that work hard every single day. And we're creating careers. So the impact of the support is very welcome. I'm very honored to be in Broomfield, and I just want to thank you all for that because it means a lot to us. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm not sure how I top that, but good evening. Again, I want to just thank the mayor, the council, the city and county of Broomfield. We're very excited to move to Broomfield and equally excited that we get to maintain residents of this company in the state of Colorado. So thank you very much for the opportunity to bring us some economic support. We're very proud of what we're doing with additive manufacturing of technical ceramics. We are a first mover in this space, and certainly would invite all of you to come by and check out our space once we're up and running in the fall. I would say would be a good time to come by. So I'll be back to tell you more about that, but thank you very much.
Thank you. We're excited you're coming. All right, well, there being no further questions, did you want to speak, council member? Oh, there being no further questions, the public hearing is closed. Next is council's consideration of proposed ordinance number 2237 on second and final reading. Will the clerk please read the proposed ordinance by title?
7B, ordinance number 2237, approving 2 business incentive agreements to encourage business expansion and job growth in Broomfield.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve ordinance number 2237 on second reading and published by title? Councilmember Leslie.
Thank you. I recommend approval of the motion.
So moved. Okay, is there a second? Councilmember Delgadillo.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Any discussion? Not seeing any. Then seeing no further discussion, we'll move forward to the vote on ordinance number 2237. Council, please cast your vote electronically. All council members have entered their vote and the results will be displayed on the screen. That passes unanimously 9-0. Thank you all again so much. And finally, the main event. The next item under action items this evening is council's consideration on first reading of proposed ordinances number 2238 and 2239 on ballot questions to amend the Broomfield Charter. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Partner.
Hey, partner. So good to see everyone. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members of the community. My name is Nancy Rogers. I'm the city and county attorney. And we have tonight for first reading 2 ordinances that have ballot questions related to changes to the charter. Next slide. The charter review process has been going on for some time. A bit of background, Broomfield became a home rule city in 1974 and adopted this home rule charter. When Broomfield became a city and a county in 2001, there were some modifications to the charter, but not a full review of the charter for updates that might need to be made. There's been a handful of amendments over the many years, but never a comprehensive review of the charter since it was adopted. In 2022, City Council established a charter review committee and appointed members in March of 2023. From April to November, the charter review committee met and went through each section of the charter and determined what areas they were going to recommend changes to the city council. They had their meetings were open to the public. They would take emails. There was a form on a website. They had tables at different events. We tried to do outreach in a variety of ways. On November 14th of 23, the CRC presented its final report and recommendations. In April and May, council discussed those potential charter changes at 3 different study sessions, 3 different public meetings. And then that brought us to tonight, where council is considering and voting on ordinances that have those ballot questions. If approved, those questions will go on the November 2024 ballot, and ultimately the voters decide on any ballot questions. Next slide. So as I mentioned, there's been, this has been a long time coming. There were 13 meetings held by the Charter Review Committee, which was made up of 5 residents and 2 council members. There were 3 study sessions that City Council had to discuss potential changes. Council reviewed every recommendation that the Charter Review Committee made, and I would say supported probably 90% of them, and then had additional tweaks to some of those recommendations, and then other recommendations on top of those recommendations. Those were all discussed at those study sessions in April, May 7th, and May 21st. There were a consensus to move forward with items. At the May 21st council meeting, study session, council had discussed timing. And at that time, council supported bringing forth what I'm going to call a repeal and reenactment. I'm sort of hesitant on that word repeal because it makes you think it's going away. It's a replacement, and it's a comprehensive update to the charter. A lot of the changes, and we'll go through them, are updates, changing city to city and county, changing municipal to Broomfield. Others are substantive changes such as term limits or making sure the independent auditor is in the charter. Next slide. All right, so the process to amend Broomfield's charter is this. You have to have a ballot question on an ordinance. It takes 2 meetings to approve an ordinance. Tonight is first reading, July 9th is second reading. If those ordinances are approved, they go on the ballot. That needs to happen before August 13th so we can make the deadlines for the election. Voters approve or reject the question. If approved, the change will go into effect immediately unless there's a timing provision in the question. I've said this already twice. I'm going to repeat it multiple times. The voters have ultimate approval. Nothing is being decided tonight. No change that's even voted on in these ordinances will take effect until a majority of the voters approve. Next slide. Next slide. There we go. We have restrictions as a government on how we can campaign or support ballot questions. After a ballot question is approved, government funds and resources may not be used to either support or oppose the ballot question. We can provide information, and we do intend to provide information to the voters and help educate them on these questions, but we're not going to be advocating for one way or the other on these questions. Elected officials and Broomfield employees and individuals, of course, can use their personal time and funds to take positions on ballot issues. And residents and interested stakeholders can also use their personal time, personal funds, and even create committees to campaign for or against a ballot question. Next slide. All right, we'll get into the meat of it. So the first ordinance is proposed ordinance 2238. This is the charter replacement. As I mentioned earlier, this is not a repeal that means the charter will go away. It's a repeal with a full replacement. The charter will not be abolished. If the question fails, then our current charter stays in effect. If the question passes, those changes stay in effect, but at no time would we lose our home rule status. This ballot question is very comprehensive, and it replaces the charter with specific updates and amendments as adopted by council, given direction by council, based on the recommendations of the Charter Review Committee or suggestions from council members. Next slide. So I'm going to go through some of the changes in proposed ordinance 2238, the repeal and reenactment ballot question. Some things didn't change. Maintaining 5 wards, 10 council members, an at-large mayor, and a council manager form of government is not being recommended to change. One change would be a 4-year term for our mayor. Mayor currently serves a 2-year term. There would be term limits for elected officials to 3 consecutive terms. Right now, term limits are not in our charter. We follow state law, which limits council members to 2 terms, 8 years total, the mayor to 3 terms, 6 years total. It makes needed changes throughout the charter to reflect Broomfield as a city and county. The easiest of these to describe is changing city to city and county. It permits council vacancies to be filled by appointment, but only until the next available election. So if a vacancy occurred within the first 3 months, that person would only fill for a year and a half. They wouldn't fill the position for 3.5 years. Next slide. I'm going to add one that's not listed there because I know we got some comments about it. This would have the mayor's vacancy be filled by the mayor pro tem, but again, only until that next election, and then somebody would be elected to serve out that remaining term, if any. So some more changes. It would require city council to adopt job descriptions, job duties, and general assignments for the mayor, mayor pro tem, and council. It deletes a lot of obsolete sections. There were a lot of sections in the charter that talked about the transition from a statutory town to a home rule city. It required a 3rd reading if there are substantive amendments to an ordinance on 2nd reading. We actually saw that in play tonight. This would be a formal change to the charter. Right now, council does that per its own rules. It would permit emergency ordinances to go into effect immediately and not 8 days later. 8 days later was, we believe historically was done because of publication requirement. It was hard to get the word out that an emergency ordinance would be passed. We know in COVID, we were able to communicate quickly with our residents about emergency orders or any emergency laws that had to be put into place. It adds a requirement for the adoption of a code of ethics. There was no changes on the open space provisions and no changes on Chapter 20, the fracking provisions. Next slide. Few more changes, requiring council to establish a charter review committee at least every 10 years. It was a good project. It was a good chance for residents and staff and council members to talk about, is this document, is this governing document really what we need it to be in 2024? And it'll be a good exercise to go through in every decade. Change city council to council throughout in recognition of the consolidated city and county roles. And then, as I mentioned, it permits the mayor to be filled by the mayor pro tem. Exhibit A to Ordinance 2238 contains a full red line, strike through, I should call it, because it's not in color, contains a full track changes to the proposed charter. Next slide. So this is what the ballot question would look like. So this is what you would receive on your ballot. And if you'll indulge me, I'll just read it. Shall the city and county of Broomfield's home rule current charter be repealed and replaced with an amended charter that acknowledges Broomfield as a city and county, removes outdated provision, and modifies the charter with regard to ward boundary maps, council meetings, publication of ordinances, term limits, the mayor's term, and other needed updates to the charter as recommended by the Charter Review Committee or proposed by council. So that's question one. That's the repeal and reenactment. Next slide. One of the changes that's in the full repeal and reenactment is a change to our election provision. Now, remember, this was a charter that was adopted and written in 1974. So it was written to say our elections follow the municipal election code. Absolutely made sense as a home rule community, as a home rule city. When we became a consolidated city and county, only one of two in the state of Colorado, it really meant that we were a little different when it came to elections. Our clerk runs a coordinated election. And what that means is that our county election is coordinated with the municipal election, and all the counting responsibilities, which includes handling the state and federal elections, take place in the same election as the Broomfield election. And our Broomfield election is a city and county election. It's not really just a municipal election anymore. So one of the proposed amendments that was strongly suggested by staff was to change the reference in Chapter 3 of the charter from the municipal election law in Title 31 to Title 1, the Uniform Election Code. Title 1 is what other counties follow to handle their elections. There's been times in the past where the city clerk and my office and the city and county attorney's office have struggled to find out which law do we have to follow, because we are a county running county coordinated elections, but we also have an obligation to follow the municipal code. We believe this will make it clearer, and this would help sort of streamline our efforts on our elections. So it wouldn't change funding for elections. I think we received a comment that somebody didn't want to change municipal to coordinated election because taxpayers fund the elections. That doesn't change at all. This is still the same type of election. It really is the name and the statute that we look to. We would be more akin to Jefferson County, Adams County, City and County of Denver, Boulder County, Arapahoe County as we deal with our elections rather than our municipal neighbors. And I think that's appropriate. The county elections are one of the bigger responsibilities that we have as a county because of the state and federal requirements. This would include a change throughout all of Chapter 3, which includes the recall provisions. In the current charter, it says that Broomfield for recall will follow the Constitution and then state law. This would, like the other changes, reference Title I. And then, I'm sorry, let me back up. This change would actually say charter controls, then code controls in Title I, and that would be the same throughout Chapter 3. Now, I don't know how much detail. I know we got a lot of comments about the recall provision, so I might wait for questions. We're not adding any requirements for recall. We're not adding to the charter. We're not adding any grounds for recall. It simply says that for recall, charter, code, and then Title I controls. For election, charter, code, and then Title I controls. Next slide. All right, so the ballot question for this one would be, shall Chapter 3 of the City and County of Broomfield's Home Rule Charter be amended to change the law governing elections from the Municipal Election Code to Title I, except as set forth in Charter or Code, and change the term municipal elections to coordinated elections throughout, in recognitions of Broomfield's status as a city and county? Next slide. That's the last of the presentation, Mara. I'm definitely open to answer questions.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Ms. Rogers, and thanks again to our citizen-led Charter Review Committee for their hard work in poring over this document and making recommendations. So we'll now proceed with public comments. Starting with in-person. If there's anyone who would like to be heard on this item, please come to the podium. State your name and neighborhood for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes, please.
Good evening. My name is Phil Hoffman, no relation to the manager, by the way. My wife and I live in Wildgrass. I've read through all of the proposed changes to the charter and don't have any issue with any of them except one, and that's Chapter 4, specifically 4.3, the terms of office. Obviously, term limits by definition should be limited. To this point, the city and county have followed state law, and it seems to me that that's perfectly appropriate and should not be changed. It should not be increased. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, council members. Thanks to Ms. Rogers. She did a great job. My name's Seth Patterson. I served on the Charter Review Committee. I live in Ward 1. I appreciate council's nearly full embrace of Charter Review Committee's suggestions. I generally support the changes that you made, and I appreciate the simplicity of a repeal and replace. But I just think it's too much to ask of Broomfield citizens. I think probably the only clear yes votes would be members of council and members of the Charter Review Committee. I don't think that's enough to make it pass. I think that approach is just poor governance and frankly, poor politics. My suggestion would be that the council and staff figure out what are really high priority items, prioritize all the different changes. And if there's some that meet very, very high priority, put them on the ballot this year. Maybe there's none that really meet that criteria. We've been living with this charter for many, many years and all of its imperfections. There's a lot of items on the ballot, I think, already from the state. So it's going to be a long ballot. I just think people are going to automatically vote no. Because it's just too much. And I don't think that serves council, staff, or the citizens of Broomfield very well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, we have a lot of people that need to speak, you guys. Let's hold off on the applause so we can get through our long list of public comments, please. Thank you.
Good evening again, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. John Ewald, Pinnacle North Subdivision. In preparing for this council session, I've listened to the debate of this item from the May 21st study session, and I've reviewed the presentation from the Charter Review Committee from November 14th of last year. In the study session, I heard it stated that the charter is overdue for review and modernization. I wholeheartedly agree, and that is clearly what the Charter Review Committee was formed to do. There are many proposed changes that the committee unanimously supported, which are directly associated with modernizing the charter and allowing city and county staff to take advantage of technological advancements. Along with changing technology, it seems 20+ years of experience has formed a better understanding of what is required to be both a city and a county. From that experience, some changes to the charter need to be made to legally and efficiently operate this and govern as a city and a county. These changes are apolitical and purely functional in nature. I would have no objection to bundling only those changes together as a repeal and replacement of the charter. The Charter Review Committee classified these changes as administrative, operational, and minor changes. On the other hand, extending term limits and changing the terms for elected officials has nothing to do with modernizing the charter and will not allow Broomfield to operate more efficiently or provide firmer legal standing. I'm not saying there's no reason to change term limits, only that those changes should not be included with a repeal and replace to modernize the charter. They should be single subject, separate ballot issues. In the May 21st study session recording, I heard a council member somewhat sheepishly state that including term limit extensions was purely a political decision. That statement should be enough to demonstrate to all that term limit changes are not a needed change, but a wanted change by those that hold a particular political viewpoint. That council member, another council member asserted the changing term limits were not controversial. That council member is either fooling themselves or attempting to fool the electorate, as anything that is exclusively politically motivated is inherently controversial. On one hand, there are changes that the Charter Review Committee and Broomfield staff have said are needed changes, and on the other are changes that some on this council want, and by their political motivation, those wants are controversial. There is a big risk that if needs and wants are combined in one ballot issue, that the issue may fail. If a truly clean ballot issue was presented that only included the needed charter changes, there is a very high likelihood of it passing. Please support the staff's needs and remove all politically motivated wants from the proposed ballot issue and retain the logically motivated needs. If the majority of this council wants to extend term limits or change terms in the future, then so be it, but please do it as a separate ballot issue.
Thank you. You guys, next.
Good evening, council, staff, Mayor Pro Tem, Mayor Rick Fernandez with Broomfield Heights here in Colorado. In Broomfield, I've been here my entire life. I have a few things, a couple observations, and then a bit of an ask. First observation I have is about priorities. I looked at the agenda, the draft agenda for the council 2-3 weeks ago, and I saw that the water tanks were on that agenda. It's not there. And the reason I'm bringing that up is I see that there's a prioritization happening here to focus on charter changes versus a need that we have in the community. I'll leave it at that. I'll just want to make that as an observation. The other observation I want to make is that going back and looking at what the Charter Review Committee recommended as far as changes were concerned, and it was broken down between administrative, minor, major changes, about 57% of the recommendations were minor and major. It's interesting that that is what happened. Now I want to go back to the two ordinances that are in front of you tonight. One of those is a minor change. It's going from Title 31 to Title I in terms of elections. Why? Why is that minor change enough to be held out separately on its own for my ballot measure, and everything else, major changes, including the things that have been brought up here tonight, term limits and everything else in between, should fit under one issue? My ask for you to do is to take your time. We've been a city and county for quite some time. The world is not going to end if these changes are not brought through in a single ballot measure. I would ask the community to look at this and say, if there's one thing in that list of 50+ items that last count are in that ballot measure that you do not agree with, vote no. That would be my recommendation. I would expect the same thing. I would just bring up a hypothetical for the council. If the committee had come back and said, we should go down and limit council members to one term of 4 years. Committee came in and said, that's what you should do. I would ask each of you, if that was on the ballot, brought in with everything else, how would you vote? I have a guess what it would be. So my ask for you is to slow down, put items on the ballot that are prioritized, as was mentioned by a previous speaker, and take your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Come on, you guys, hold the applause, please.
No clapping, please. Lois Vanderkoy, Broomfield Heights. And I didn't prepare remarks like I usually do, but I've been trying to listen. And it seems, and reading on Facebook, which is a kind of a cesspool of complaints and, distortions, it seems like, what the Charter Review Committee and you as council are doing is trying to modernize and make government more efficient. You're dealing with very complicated matters. We heard tonight about education, Bell Swan, about businesses, about the economy, about environmental sustainability. all of these things are very complicated. And I know some of you individually pretty well and how hard you work on these issues and how intelligent you are. And it seems like there's a distrust happening in our community just because you are working on those particular issues and trying to promote values of diversity, inclusion, affordable housing, environmental sustainability. So, you know, I like the idea maybe of splitting it up to make the controversial part around term limits a separate issue, because then that would give voters more opportunity to be clear about that, but also to educate the public as best you can with knowing that there's going to be opposition and not hearing what you're about, as to why you would want to extend, you know, 3 terms, or for the mayor to have a 4-year term. I mean, it makes sense to me, given all the work you're doing, and there are elections each 4 years, so voters can have a choice, you know, so I don't understand what the big deal is. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next.
Hi, Council and Mayor. I'm Robin Cunningham, and I live in Aspen Creek. Back on July the 12th, also, I moved into Broomfield in 2002. And I'm a real estate broker, been a broker for 40 plus years. Really, I started when I was 15. I am lucky enough to live across the street from Hank Stovall's daughter. And from any of you who are familiar with Hank Stovall, he was on council, I think, for 24 years. He was involved in the charter. On July 12th, I sent every member of council a letter from Hank. And it was really important when he was involved with the charter to make our council non-partisan. And I think we're losing ourselves because each one of you, unfortunately, I know where you stand politically. When I moved here in 2002, didn't have a clue. And I think that's super important, probably for everyone sitting here. When he was developing the charter, again, important it was nonpartisan. It was important to have an executive power in the city manager. So hopefully you read that letter that he sent. And interestingly enough, okay, I got a minute 22. I was touring assisted living facilities for my mother. And because I lived across the street from his daughter, I knew where Hank was living. And I went over to him, introduced myself. We'd met on a few occasions. And you know what? At 90-some years old, he asked if council had changed the charter. First thing he said. So I think it's important. And as many people have said here, take a breath, get the important things changed, and the political things, they should not be changed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and Council for allowing me to speak tonight. My name is Gary Baldwin. I live in the Broadlands. Just to pick up with a lot of the theme that we've heard from the community, I think relative to my brief overview of the charter, my concern is that most of the charter, definitely more than half, is purely administrative, which, you know, after nearly a quarter of a century of a city and county, it makes sense to update the language, incorporate the technological changes associated with the recommended modifications. However, I think that the political items such as term limits and changing the structure of the government and the power of the council are disingenuous, particularly the way the item was phrased. You've heard people say that, you know, if there's one thing in there you're against, vote no. And I think that's the attitude that I would certainly take and that most citizens would take. I think it would be wise to take this opportunity to make those necessary administrative changes to update the charter and then either have a separate item specific to the objectives to city council and government, or to, as many have recommended, take more time and vet that out accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, please.
Hello, I'm Katie Hood. I live in Ward 3 in Lockmore neighborhood. And I am, want to be very clear. I think this is a big mistake on so many levels. And if I went through them all, it would sound pretty aggressive and attacking, which is not really, I think, helpful at this point. You just need to know that there are so many parts of this. It's complicated, and to have it in one unit or one and a partial is really not a good idea. It's badly done. You will get a lot of people, and certainly people like me, thinking you have not an idea of what the common people are thinking. So therefore, as everybody, I think I'm hearing a fair amount saying, slow down. What is the big rush? This has been going on for a while. Just take it item by item. Get a more reasonable way of, I know you think you've done your homework with all these committees and whatnot, but for people like me who have just moved here relatively recently, there is really a gap. And so please do not do this. Please slow down and do it differently so that it can be maybe successful, that it will be updated, and the things that are important will be done, and the things that aren't, you will get the message, and hopefully you will stick to that, since you are working for the people, we the people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next.
Hi, I'm Sandy Anderson, and I live in the Broadlands. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, Council, City Leadership Staff, and committee members. I'd like to take just a minute to acknowledge the work that was done and the attention to detail in our city and county charter language cleanup and the comprehensive review of a document over 23 years old. Let's look at some old city laws in Colorado that should be cleaned up. You're not allowed to drive a black vehicle on Sundays in Denver. In Pueblo, you better not let those pesky lawn weeds get out of control. It's illegal to allow dandelions to grow inside the city limit. In Fountain, it's against the law to have any weeds on your lawn. The committee review and updating of our city charter was needed. 23 years is a long time, and a lot of things have changed. And I think that the committee has recognized that and has provided all of their feedback. In addition, I also support longer terms for the mayor and wondered why we hadn't addressed this previously like other cities have. So thank you for the opportunity to speak and hold the applause.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, excuse me. Hi, I'm Janet Sund. I live in Ward 5, Westlake. I've lived here since I was born in 61. And I'm sorry I didn't address you. Just nervous, I guess. My apologies. I too am not impressed that you all would put all of these issues in one ballot. It's confusing for people that have went to college. It's confusing for older people. It's confusing for younger people. To me, it's disingenuous, like was already mentioned. It's almost like you're trying to hide something. If they think they look at it and there's so many questions to go through, they're going to go, I don't know what to do with this. And well, this one looks good, that one looks good. I'm just going to vote yes, or I'm going to vote no. and forget about the rest. And then they're going to be upset after these changes get done. And they're like, how did this happen? And that's not fair to the residents of Broomfield. We deserve better. We deserve to be treated like adults. We deserve to have the ability to vote on individual items and not have things rush through just because you're trying to meet a deadline for the printing and because you're trying to hopefully think that people are just going to vote yes, go ahead and make these changes, because on the surface, making these minor changes because we're now a city and county versus a city, that all sounds good and well and needs to be done. But if people think, oh, well, that's okay, then the rest of it's probably okay without even, most people don't take the time to read all of that. And you're putting them in a position to only have one option, a yes or a no. And that is not fair to people of Broomfield. That's not fair to citizens of Colorado for that matter. And I would like to see the rest of us being treated as important. And I don't think that the city council in doing this is empowering the citizens or valuing the citizens. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Next, please.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Heather Dunham. I live in Aspen Creek neighborhood, and I am here because I learned about this less than 24 hours ago, have been frantically trying to read so that I can be an informed voter. And I agree with everything else that people have been saying tonight, that we need to slow down and allow each sort of major change or section of changes to be opened up into individual, because I read through it quickly, digested what I could in 24 hours and was like, yeah, I have questions about this. I'm not voting yes because I have questions and I want to know exactly what this is meaning. So some of your average voters obviously don't do their due diligence, read through things, and they're going to be like, I don't know what this means. Heck no. There's plenty of things in this that I'm like, yeah, all for it. Let's modernize. The committee did a ton of great work and I super appreciate that. But there's some other things that I have questions about how it's going to affect me. And we all, as US citizens, I think, understand that local government is probably most impactful for us on our daily lives versus state or national federal changes. And so we need the opportunity to be able to understand these changes in very clear detail, not just one random paragraph that includes 50 changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, I'm Mike Billingsley. I live in Red Leaf in Ward 4. I want to also Mayor Pro Tem and council members, thank you so much for your service and your time and your commitment to our community. I think that it is good that you had 5 citizens, but there is some concern with regards to the politicization of the council members that were on the committee because of the way that you decided to bring these changes forth. And that is a major concern, and it's a matter of optics. And that's where you're getting these people out here and have for multiple other issues. It's the optics of bundling, and instead of taking your time and breaking out important issues like term limits, not that anyone's against them, they should be debated separately because they are important. And obviously, we have an imbalance politically, so this looks politically motivated when you bundle like this. So my suggestion on all of these items is to clearly break issues out. If we're just modernizing language, fine. And I would most likely support that. And if you wrote that simply, I think that would probably pass. But when you bundle this much into it, you get a lot of confusion. And clearly, I don't think anything singularly in this is problematic, but they could be explained easier if you broke it out. And it's a matter of optics for you as a council. So that's my suggestion. Thank you again for your service.
Thank you very much.
Good evening.
My name is Bruce Peterman. Thank you, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, City Manager, and Council. My response is going to be musical, except I'm not going to dance, but I'm going to describe some music. I've been Ward 4. In Ward 4, I've been a Broomfield resident for 30 years, been married 36, father of 2 kids, 3 cats, and 1 visitor cat. I'm a geological engineer. I've got enough letters behind my name to, we could get together and play a little Scrabble game if we wanted to. The history lesson, 1974, March 1974, Frank Zappa comes out with his 6th album, 18th in his collective archive called Apostrophe. Mr. Zappa put that out in stereo and quadraphonic. The lead track was Don't Eat Yellow Snow. Sage advice for such an old musical and vinyl-based LP document, or vinyl document, LP record, sorry. Much of our Broomfield charter shares the same date and vintage of that might seem old and outdated jargon. Definition-wise, looking back to the document reflects some of the founders' thoughts, and then the fact that it's stood up for 50 years so far is a testament to the people who put some thought into it to begin with, regardless of the jargon and everything else. History has some milestones. All that is old is not bad, cranky, smelly, and objectionable. You might want to ask my kids about that. New and fancy can hold equal amounts of slippery and smelly. Frank Zappa has another song called on that same album called Stinkfoot. It involves wearing python boots too long, and then so long that he thinks his dog is talking back to him. Look it up. Its lyrics are absolutely wonderful. Some government efficiency was warranted and mentioned in these charter changes, of course. Why not? We need to get it updated. I disagree with the every 10 years. I think if we can make it good now, we can make it stand another 50. More time for term limits is what I have problems with. I'm not really sure what the motivation is there. I guess I look at everything that's been said tonight on that political. I don't begrudge the programmatic changes, just the complex ones. The concentration of power ones, tacit removal of citizen involvement, or an opportunity as such. Sometimes no one shows up to these meetings. Sometimes some people do. I think it's important to act accordingly, regardless of who shows up to these meetings. And I think you do a very good job of that, by the way. On these changes, will our collective wheels come off? I don't think so. These changes are broken down, should be more discreet. And if you look up Frank's album label of that vintage, it's Discreet, D-I-S-C-K-R-E-E-T. Is a wholesale repeal and replacement needed? I'm not sure. But old advice and guidance is still good. Don't eat yellow snow and don't wear python boots too long. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next.
Brett Baldwin, Broadlands. Thank you, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and Council. Like many others here tonight, gonna echo some points here, but why are we rushing trying to get this on the ballot? You know, as we all heard tonight from a member on the committee, this is certainly not the right approach to get this done. And during some of those committee meetings, you know, the committee committed to doing this the right way, taking their time to do this the appropriate way, one step at a time, making sure the community really had a say in their, was putting their trust in council on these decisions. Well, from my standpoint, growing up in Broomfield and being here tonight, it certainly doesn't seem that way. And it's pretty discouraging to see that this is the route that was taken. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, please.
Hello, good evening. My name is John Santoro. Lived here since 1977, Eagle Trace resident. And I thank you, Madam Mayor and Mr. Mayor Pro Tem and the City Manager and Council for allowing us to express ourselves. I think my take from this evening, if you've ever done a bylaws change or a covenant change for a homeowners association. This is certainly a much bigger job, and I really appreciate Seth Patterson for his work and the rest of the committee and your support of this. I think has to be done. I think we need to bring our documents up to date. It's absolutely essential, especially with changing laws and our kind of half on and half off various legal documents right now. So I think we all appreciate that. What the summary of what I've heard tonight sounds like is the citizens don't like the bundling part. It's not objecting to the change. It's the bundling. And if we could figure out a way to very professionally do what Seth and others have recommended, to do the essential changes and then approach each of the items individually, because one of the things you don't like to feel railroaded or pushed into something if you don't understand each item. And that's one of the things I'm hearing from those who have spoken before me. So I want to raise my voice in support of making the essential changes, detailing each one of the reasons why those are important for the citizens to vote in favor so we can have a successful vote. And for those things that should not be presented as part of the essentials, but are the wants, let's have a debate about those, because maybe some of those will get passed if the case can be made in a very professional way. So I want to thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, please.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, council members. My name is Jan Billsborough, and I'm a 10-year resident of the Red Leaf neighborhood in Ward 4. As some of you know, I have a master's degree in public administration and experience in municipal government, and I'm very passionate about the importance of local government. I request that you do not approve the repeal and replace approach to the charter. I know that you are dedicated to the concepts of citizen involvement, fairness, and transparency, and to include these varying significant governance changes and some changes not considered by the Charter Commission in a cleanup of the charter doesn't promote those concepts of citizen involvement, fairness, and transparency. Significant issues include 3.5 recall, 4.3 and 4.4 term limits and mayoral duties, 4.7 vacancies, and 4.9 powers of the council. Respectfully, the idea of the council developing job descriptions seems contrary to me to the role of the council in relationship to the electorate. And council's role is defined by the charter and state law. So please separate these questions that you think need to be addressed by the voters. And regarding item 6.9, which is publication of ordinances, I suggest that you consider keeping the ordinances published in our local Broomfield enterprise in the name of transparency and also the support of our local news media. I saw the figure of $20,000 a year for cost. And if that's the correct figure, that's an extremely low price to pay. The latest figures I've seen from the enterprise are a publication basis of 40,000 people it reaches, and the Bee in the Loop reaches about 12,000. So I really think we should strongly consider continuing to have ordinances published. I appreciate your consideration of those ideas. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and Council. I think I got it right. I just have a couple comments. My name is Bill Crothers. I live in Northmore. The thing here that I think we need to understand is you guys have spent hundreds of hours talking, listening, studying all of these changes. And you expect us to come in and read it one time and be expert enough to vote on it. It doesn't work that way. Okay. It's when the US government does it, we all are appalled when they push through some 10,000 page bill and they want to vote on it that night. And half the people haven't read it. They don't understand it. But that's how they like to do things, because that way they get to push things through that they want. Okay. In my home and auto insurance, I always thought bundling was going to be the answer to everything, but I found out it's really not. There's really no advantage to bundling all this stuff together and expecting everybody to vote on it exactly that way. And I think that's really all I have to say. We need a lot more time to really understand what you guys are asking. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but give us time to look at it, understand it. And when we vote, we're making a good choice that we can agree with. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, please.
Hello, my name is Bruce Brashears and I live in Ward 3, and thank you for allowing us all to, as citizens in Broomfield, to voice our concerns over, whatever issue that's coming up, so that you receive feedback, from us, that are sitting back watching all of this, but don't have as big a voice. I look at this from the perspective that in America, we're very fortunate that we have government organized as running by the consent of the governed. And within that, the idea of elections and so forth are for accountability to the consent of the governed. And for me, I like having accountability, because then it keeps everybody on their toes to think about, hey, am I really representing who I'm doing, whatever. But anyway, I don't need to give you a civics class. But the thing I'm saying is that when it comes to accountability, I really, 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 really like 2-year terms, because it helps keep actively present in the mind of everyone that is in office, that in 2 years, everything you're doing, can come up and you will be accountable at the ballot box as well. So that is something I would like to see remain the same within all this. And let's see and also when it comes to recall criteria, again, I'm in favor and I lean towards defaulting to as much accountability of the governing over with the consent of the governed, that, leave it alone, just because if people want to have a voice to express things, let us be able to express that, instead of, feeling like we're squeezed in a box and it can only do things a certain way per se. And so then again, when you have this bundling, I can't say anything that the last guy didn't say, because he did it well, with all that. But when it's that way, by necessity for space on the ballot, it's so vague that you have no idea what you're voting on just reading the paragraph. And that's where, when it comes to large changes, we think it's better that it's all broken down. The words, changing city and to, city and county and stuff like that. Yeah, all that stuff, just say, and just specifically say it's for the, updating the wording and the language. And I don't think anybody has a problem with that. Oh, I'm about out of time. Okay, so that's enough. Basically, just break it up, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Roxy Jewell, Lackamore. I went to a few of these committee meetings, and I've been to all of you guys' meetings. And I think that the first one, or 1A, could be good if it just had to do with doing the cleanup of our legal definitions and how we use the name Broomfield, City and County. CCOB, City and County of Broomfield. You are the council of Broomfield. You are the mayor of Broomfield. You're the city manager of Broomfield. This is
City and county.
Yeah.
Saves money.
Yeah. So I like the cleanup idea, but get the fat out. This is not a federal government where you're sitting on a big group to where nobody cares. This is a community. This is Broomfield. We're more intelligent than that. You add one piece of fat in it and it's going to fail. So if you want it to fail, then you'll have to wait till 2025 and stick it out there then, or 2026. But keep the fat out of it. And as far as 1B is concerned, I haven't studied that one enough really to make a intelligent opinion on that one, but I'm sure I will be studying it also. So that's just my opinion. And I've been here for 37 years and I've watched all of you do amazing things. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to be heard? Last call for public comment on this item. I don't see anyone else. Let me check online. Nope, there's no one on the phone. So I thank you all so much for coming and letting us hear from you directly. It really means a lot that you took the time to come down and tell us what you think. It is a little past our 8 o'clock recess. So before we go into council questions and comments, hope you don't mind, but we need to take a 10-minute recess. So it's 8:05. We'll be back at 8:15. We'll take a little break. Thank you. Make your way to your seats, please. Welcome back. Is everybody back? Okay, good. Thank you all for the break. We're going to continue our discussion on the charter review recommendations, starting with questions from City Council next. Members should limit themselves to questions during this portion. The time to introduce amendments and state positions for or against this item is later. Are there any questions from council? And I will go straight to you, Councilmember Cohen.
Thank you, Mayor. There will be an amendment later about term limits, but just
Ooh,
foreshadow it.
teasing.
Just tease that along. So I did want to ask Nancy, sorry, it's the attorney, a question, since there was a lot of discussion about bundling, but I think we needed to discuss the single topic rule that we have to follow. So could you discuss that, what we're obligated to follow? And by my reading of the charter, we're looking at like, if we did single topics, it's 20 or so. That would have to be 20 separate ballot measures.
So the single subject rule, and it's different from the state ballot rule. Our single subject rule is that our ordinances must be one subject. And that means there has to be some cohesiveness between the question being asked or what council is voting on any given ordinance. Here, the glue keeping it all together is a repeal and reenactment, a repeal and replacement of the charter. That's sort of making it a single subject. Alternatively, you can do them like we're doing the Title III question of just a sort of more finite question. When you look at the charter, it's divided by chapters. For most of the questions, if we were going to divide them out, it would be by chapter. And that would be the single subject, Chapter 3, Chapter 4, Chapter 5. Chapter 4 in our charter is a little bit dense, so we might even separate those out because Chapter 4 has the vacancies and it has term limits. So I think as a lawyer, I could justifiably say Chapter 4 is one subject, but I could also say term limits is one subject. So it just needs to have some sort of cohesive common theme to bring the question together. And it's more of an art than a science. You had also mentioned, and a couple of our speakers had asked about multiple questions. Dividing it up by chapter and even taking apart Chapter 4 into sort of these individual questions by more substantive topics, we're looking at between 21 and 25 questions.
Is there any limit on how many can be on each individual ballot?
No.
I think from the discussion before, I think it was the city manager, perhaps it said 4 to 5 would be a max for voter fatigue.
That's our recommendation, yes.
So 3 to 4 years. So 24, 25, 26, possibly 27.
Yes.
We'd be asking about charter amendments from the charter review that met in 23. Just want to put that in context. Is there a cost in terms of the election, each if we do break it up versus if it's put on a single repeal and replace it, we've seen that one paragraph that'll fit on one page. But if we have 4 or 5 ballot measures in the next successive 3 or 4 elections, we'd be adding several pages, I assume, to each ballot.
There would be printing costs and without knowing the exact language, it would be hard to quantify that. The main cost would be the staff cost each year, which is mostly staff costs from my office, from city communications, because we would do an educational, informational campaign, and also the city clerk's office.
Is there any issue with the charter changing every year consecutively for 4 years?
Not legally, no.
Not legally, we just have to keep updating it.
Yes, yes.
Maintain
And we publish our charter online, and we do offer printed copies.
Thank you very much. That's it.
Thank you. Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor. That was quick. Make sure I'm ready. We talked about, you talked about that we can't support a ballot measure once we've approved the ballot measure or once we approve the ordinance, we can't spend city county funds in support of the ballot measure, but we can do informational.
Yes, you cannot advocate.
What's the line there? That seems like a fine line between the two.
Can I reuse my art and science line
yeah.
again? I mean, it really is. And we see this across the state when you have ballot issues where somebody claims that a community is using public funds to advocate, that their literature crossed the line to say, here's why we need to go to Title I over Title 31 versus this ballot question would change us from Title I to 31, and here's what they both say. So it definitely is something that we're really cognizant of, and we try to stay away from certain trigger words like why this is important or why your community needs you to vote in favor of this.
Okay. My question really is because, I mean, just over this conversation we've been having, the community conversation the last couple weeks, everyone knows that I've been the biggest supporter of the repeal and reenactment because it is the simplest, in my opinion, and it's cheapest, as Councilmember Cohen pointed out, to do it all at once. But the voter information does concern me. Just this weekend, we saw there was emails that came to us, and they came from social media posts that were confused about the municipal versus coordinated election, which to me is just simple cleanup, but there was confusion over what that meant. So what's the plan, regardless of what we do, what's the plan to inform voters about what the ballot questions actually mean or what impact they'll have?
Well, it's an evolving plan, and a lot of it was dependent on what actually gets approved and goes to the voters. We've met internally to talk about what the communication plan was, and even had talked about getting something out sooner rather than later, but we didn't want to add to the confusion. So the plan would be a lot of online information, specifically on our website, potentially a Broomfield Voice type page just for this measure. We'd look at maybe email blast if we could get it to something that was succinct enough. And then something that we tried with the Charter Review Committee was postcards with a QR code that would send people back to that website with more information.
And if we did the repeal reenactment, every voter would get a blue book with the ordinance itself. The ballot question itself is a short paragraph.
Yes.
But every voter would get a blue book with the detailed change by change, right?
I have to double check on if that would be entirely printed. Our plan was to have the prints of the red line, the tracked charter available at the clerks, available at multiple locations, so somebody could see what those changes are.
Would something like the Bloomfield Voice page on that also, could it include, here's this change, this is what it means, here's this change, this is a detailed line by line what each change means?
Yes, it could.
Okay. Okay, and then secondly, off of that, it was mentioned by several people that we should take the controversial things out and do the non-controversial things. Do you have any sense of how many, if we took the controversial things out, how many would that be? And if we did repeal reenactment for everything else, how many do you estimate we take out?
So controversial is sort of, it's in the eye of the beholder because, we had a speaker that talked about publication by ordinance. That was a staff request. That would, from staff's perspective, that seems a non-controversial update, but we have somebody who disagrees, which I totally understand. My numbers, that would reduce it to about 15 questions. When we're talking about just minor word changes, updates, but we get to the area where an update for me might be an update or for council, but for another person is very substantive.
Things like the Merit Commission was a staff recommended update.
Which one?
The Merit Commission.
Yes, in chapter 9. Yes.
But likely somebody would find that controversial.
Yes.
Okay. I don't, but that's a different thing.
Or to use an example, my office, one of the changes we made for the city attorney was that I would be allowed to supervise staff rather than just attorneys because the risk managers on my staff as our paralegal, non-attorney paralegals. To me, that's an update. Somebody might take issue with that.
Okay, so if we're not going to do the repeal reenactment, it would just be, your recommendation would just be do it individual.
Yes, but I do think there's still going to be some comprehensive questions, even in those individual ones. Like city, shall the charter be updated to change city to city and county throughout and change Broomfield, municipal to Broomfield throughout? That would be one question. So we'll have some of these bigger, broad questions that cover all sections of charter, but for the most part, it would be about chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3.
Okay. All right, that's all the question I have, Mayor. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Leslie.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to compliment everybody on your decorum tonight. We don't always have the opportunity to hear thoughtful, clear presentations without the emotion. And I really want to tell you how much we all respect the way you all approached us this evening. Number two, I'm just so pleased to finally understand Frank Zappa. I mean, obviously I'm of that generation and I just never understood. Yes, I knew what Yellow Snow was because I grew up in New York, but I just never understood his music. So thank you for that. I also want to emphasize though that all of this has been a process and has gone through a number of months and iterations and discussions and input from various sources and things, not just this year, but over the past. And it's really intended in the end to better serve you all, to better serve the citizens of Broomfield. And I know that there are some things that may raise questions and need further clarification, and maybe, you know, there's going to be disagreement about it. We hope that once people learn more about some of these things, they will be less inclined to think of them as controversial and say, well, yeah, maybe that does make sense for us to do that. But I agree that we need to slow down and we need to separate these things out. We need to do the things that are going to be easier for the voters to approve. Then, as has been suggested a couple of times, if there's one thing I don't agree with, I'm going to shut the whole thing down. I do agree with that. I'm concerned about this upcoming election for a lot of reasons. I fear that a lot of things are going to be turned down because of the complexity of the topics, not just ours, but national considerations and state considerations. I worry that a lot of us are just going to go down and just say, no, 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 rather than saying yes, 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 because the dissonance that we have in our public discourse nowadays is creating that kind of a tendency. And yet I heard tonight so many of you talk about the need to be thoughtful, the need to have better clarity, the need to have more information. And I agree with that. So I'm inclined to want to encourage my colleagues to prioritize those items that, quote, are non-controversial. And again, I think that's up to the eye of the beholder, but I think we could probably decide which ones are going to be less inclined to be controversial. I think-
Councilmember Leslie, did you have any questions for Ms. Rogers?
No, I'm just lecturing right now.
Okay, well, you'll actually
Yeah.
have another opportunity after we get to
Yeah,
discussion.
well, thank you, Mayor. I won't need that other opportunity and
No.
finish now, but I just wanted to thank
I'll
everybody.
take it
for
away
yours.
now.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm just kidding. Is that it? Oh, okay, thank you. Councilmember Nguyen.
Thank you, Mayor. Very just briefly, I just want to ask what steps were made before 2023 for the charter review? Were there any efforts, you know, ever since Broomfield was incorporated as a county and city to change the charter? Or maybe this is something, you know, I'm not familiar with, but would you have an idea?
I do. Over the years, if you give me a minute to pull it up, there have been, I want to say at least 10, but less than 15 amendments to the charter. A couple brought forth by residents to council, like open space in chapter 20 on fracking. A couple made by council. One of the most recent amendments was changing the gender so that we had a lot of he, him, his throughout charter, and we changed that so that it acknowledged she's and they's. So those are some of the most recent ones, but I do have a list if you want me to go through some of them.
I just wanted just a briefly history, and I appreciate that quick summary. Another question I have is going off of the Blue Book mention. I know it's very unlikely that we can have the language of the charter changes on the Blue Book, but just briefly mention, well, is there any other ways we could inform the public about these changes? Again, it's just once again, just for folks to know how they can see the changes.
Yeah, probably the greatest tool will be our website and feeding people back to that website, which would have different versions to explain the charter changes. We have the red line, the track changes. We have a chart, and then similar to what Councilmember Marsh Holsham was talking about, an explanation document that went through each chapter and explained the changes. And other communication out to the community would always try to feed people back to that website. And that seems consistent with some of our partners throughout the state who've done comprehensive charter changes over the last few years.
That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilmember, and Councilmember Henkel.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for your presentation tonight, and you've done a lot of work on this, and so is our Charter Review Committee. So for those of you who said that this is all new to you, we encourage you to keep engaging. They've been engaging with the Review Committee for months. They've had many public meetings, and we appreciate any continued engagement. I just have a few questions for you, Ms. Rogers. In our elections currently, there was some talk of public comment tonight about, keep the partisan politics out. Is there a D or an R next to our names when we run for office? Is it partisan? Is it considered partisan?
No, and actually we have a provision in charter that says our elections are nonpartisan, and that is not changing.
Okay, thank you. And then how long would the voters have the language then? So you mentioned we need to have the language by August 12th or 13th?
It needs to be approved by the
Approved
13th.
by the 13th, okay. How long would the language be in their hands then? I know that we had talked about the Blue Book before. Where would it be and how long would it be in their hands?
Well, I think the Blue Book and the formal ballot, that is on a separate timeline than some of the communication efforts that I was speaking to. Those would start as soon as we have an approved ballot question. Second reading is scheduled for July 9th. So if it was to be approved, we'd start working on it very quickly to get the language out.
Okay, so at least 4 months and quite a few days, I'm assuming, since July.
Yeah, to November 5th.
Okay, all right. And then one more question. We were talking about, term limits and what the state says. I know that cities and counties have changed what the state says as far as term limits go, right? I believe Loveland actually might have ended their term limits
did.
totally. So I do believe in term limits. I just think that it needs to be consistent with the region. Many commissioners have 3 terms. If we have a mayor that runs for 3 terms, we should have commissioners that also run for 3 terms. Is the 2 terms only for city council members, or is it also for commissioners at the state level? Is it for both, or is it just for commissioners? Because we're also both. And then we can also, like if we're on Westminster City Council, those council members can run for another office after that. So they have all of these continuous, ways that they can serve their community. We don't. We're actually quite limited because we are a city and a county. So at the state level, I just have concerns that we aren't afforded the same opportunity that other cities and counties have to represent their areas for a longer term.
So you're going to tax me on my county knowledge. So I'm going to have to confirm that. But home rule cities, including home rule city and counties like Broomfield, can establish their own term limits. In the absence of term limits in our charter, we follow the state law. So that's where you have Loveland being able to abolish term limits through its charter. As for counties, I don't want to speak out of turn. So let me research that and make sure I have it right. And then I'll circle back on that question.
Thanks. Yeah, I feel like we're a bit of a unicorn with that. I think that's all of the questions I have for now. I still don't think if term limits are up for the voters, the first question is also up for the voters if you have different term limits, and then it's also up for the voters if you want those people in office. So the voters always speak.
So Councilmember, I do have the answer on counties. So counties have the same ability to modify their term limits. Looking at some counties near us, 2 terms for 4 years, term limits of 2 4-year terms. That's, I'm going through, Dolores has eliminated, Douglas is 2 by 4, El Paso is 2 by 4, Arapahoe has eliminated their term limits. Give me another county. Adams, thank you. Adams is 3 by 4. Larimer is 3 by 4. And let's do one more. Maybe Clear Creek, going past Jeffco. Where's Jeffco? Jefferson is 2 by 4.
Okay. Yeah, we've noticed just at the county level that if you have more experience, you can generally go to bat for more dollars for your county. So I'm just letting people know that. And you are more than welcome to join a lot of our county meetings. So if you want dollars for Broomfield, you need to have experienced people in the seat. Thanks.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you to staff members and members of the Charter Review Committee for all your work on the reviewing of our charter, as well as thank you to the residents who emailed and provided public comments tonight. Just looking through some of these issues, at the last study session, I put forward 5 top priorities that I felt that needed to be ballot questions, as opposed to going with the repeal and reenactment of the charter. So the elections piece is a separate ordinance tonight that we are going to be seeing. But I wanted to start off with that one because that was a high priority for staff, and that staff also recommended this be placed on the 2024 ballot measure. Ms. Rogers, you had talked about the piece that it is important to clarify that when looking at elections and recalls that it goes charter, code, and Title I. Why is that important, and how is that? Why is that important for? That's how our elections and recalls are conducted.
Our main goal here is to not have conflicting rules that govern our clerk. She doesn't have a choice when she is doing state and federal elections. She's got to take into account what Title I says. For our local elections, we definitely have a lot more flexibility. So that's where we want to make sure that our charter controls, our code controls, and then we look to Title I. But just having Title I consistent across the board, when we have to go outside our local laws to look at the state law, we'd like to only look at one title and not be shuffling between 2 titles. The other thing that's good when you're a home rule city and county, and we've talked about how unique that is, to have charter, then code, then state law gives us the most local power to help run our elections. We won't be able to modify laws that apply to state or federal elections, but when it comes to our elections, we can still have those run the way we want locally because it says charter, code, then state law.
So with that piece, it's helping to clarify for our clerk and help to clarify for the conducting our elections. That will make it much more efficient as well as clear.
Yes, yes, for sure.
There was the piece of that was mentioned again tonight, the municipal versus coordinated elections. Why is that differentiation important, and why do we put that within our charter?
So before we became a consolidated city and county, we had municipal elections. That was the only thing we were responsible for. When we needed to do our elections with a county, we would do them with a coordinated election with Jefferson County, with Adams County. And so now as a city and county, we are responsible for that coordinated election, and coordinated meaning the federal election, the state election, the local elections are all brought together for the clerk who has the responsibility of making sure the residents in his or her community have the ability to vote in that election. So our clerk is doing a coordinated election this November. And even though she is just the Broomfield clerk, she's got all the same responsibilities that the Jefferson County clerk does to host a coordinated election. So coordinated is the proper term for what our elections are. It doesn't mean we don't have our local election anymore. We will still have all of our local offices. We will still have all of our local ballot questions and any tax question, let's say.
Great, thank you. I know that one of the pieces of this election section that is kind of a piece that there's a sticking point for some residents is around the recall piece. And this is one in which we're changing, and there are some changes within that section, part of section 9, or sorry, chapter 3. There's the removal of the 90 days as well as the Title I, and then council may prescribe by ordinance. Can you talk a little bit more about why that's important within this recall section?
Councilmember, Mayor Pro Tem Shaft, if you give me a second, I'd like to actually pull up the exhibit.
Great, thanks.
So I can. So this went through different iterations with the Charter Review Committee and then with council during the study session discussions. So scrolling to, for anybody who's looking at the track changes, this would be in
This is section 3.5.
3.5, yes. So if I can, I'd like to start with 3.1, which pretty much says all elections shall be governed by Title I, except as otherwise provided for in charter as the council may prescribe by ordinance. That's the overarching rule on elections. So when we scroll down to recall, for consistency, says any election official or elected officer of the city, that's existing language, and county may be recalled at any time after 90 days in office. That was removed for consistency with Title I, which has at any time after 6 months in office. By the electors entitled to vote for a successor of such incumbent, that's existing language, through the procedure and the manner provided for by Title I in Colorado Revised Statutes, except as otherwise provided in this charter or as council may prescribe by ordinance. So that's the exact same language that was used in 3.1 above. So that consistency of saying Title I, when we're talking anything election or recall, which includes recall, we're saying Title I, except as stated in charter or as council might prescribe by ordinance. Now, by ordinance means by code. Council passes code provisions by ordinance.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you. Another piece that was pointed out by one of our members of the public was the publication of ordinances. This is section 6.9. Again, this was another staff high priority. This part is very short in terms of what this section says. Pursuant to requirements for publication of ordinances as published elsewhere in this charter, said ordinances shall be published on the city and county website and may also, in the council's direction, be published by title in a newspaper of general circulation in the city and county. So the change for this, I believe, was driven from conversations with the Charter Review Committee. Why is this change necessary, and why would this be a high priority for staff?
This came to the Charter Review Committee as a recommendation from staff, from the city clerk's office. There is a monetary component here, and the amount that was quoted, $20,000, is generally the amount. It can fluctuate depending on printing. For example, the drought ordinance, which was 36 pages long, that had to be fully published twice. Same with all of our firearm ordinances. So the cost can fluctuate probably anywhere between 20 and maybe 50,000, depending on the ordinances that were passed. There was a couple reasons that staff had wanted this change. The cost savings, but also believing that how we're engaging with our public right now in the most effective way is making information available on multiple platforms, including our website, including our agenda system, and also through the newsletters that we send out to individuals. And looking at how the publication looked when you see it, if you've ever read the legal notices in the newspaper, it is very, very hard to read. So what we have some anecdotal information that when people see something published, they might call and say, can I get a better copy of this? And we'll send them a better copy. So it just doesn't seem from staff's perspective to be the best way to communicate with residents at this point when we're talking about the publications of laws.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. I have some more questions, but I'll pause and allow my council colleagues to ask other questions. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other Councilmember Lim?
Attorney Rogers, could you comment on whether there was any discussion in the Charter Review Committee itself whether they would how they would recommend moving forward with their individual recommendations. So did they discuss, I mean, it's, go ahead, answer the question.
No, that's a good question, Councilmember Lim. The topic would come up occasionally, and I almost wish Chair Sam Taylor was here, because one of the things he said as chair is our task here is to review the charter, to go through each second and provide recommendations. What council decides to do with that at that point is their decision. So there wasn't ever a formal position taken by Charter Review Committee, the Charter Review Committee as a body, as to how council should move forward at this stage.
Okay. And my other question is, could you please clarify if we decide to not to go forward with ordinance number 2238, the ballot question to replace the charter, what will be the process to look at individual questions before August 13th?
Well, and again, that date's important because of the deadlines imposed by the Secretary of State to get on this year's ballot. I would be looking for council direction to see if they wanted me to prepare other single questions, like let's just use term limits because it's out there, like a separate term limit question. And then work with Manager Hoffman to find 2 meetings between now and August 13th that we can do a first reading and second reading before that deadline passes. After that point, it would be probably part of an annual report that I would do to council to say, it's time for us to talk about charter changes again, and bring out the list and say, here's the ones we've have brought forward already. Here's what remains. What would council like to do this year? Probably do that in every spring of every year going forward.
Okay, thank you for that explanation.
Is that all?
Yes.
Thank you. Any other council member questions? Councilmember Marshall.
Just one follow-up, Attorney Rogers. The repeal and reenactment ordinance requires a 2/3 affirmative vote, correct?
Correct.
Is that, with Councilmember Ward absent, is that 2/3 of members present or 2/3 of all council?
It's 2/3 of the governing body. I read that to be 2/3 of the elected officials, so council, all of council, the 10 members.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. My question is, what of these items would our staff say are really time sensitive in terms of ensuring that the operations of the city and county run smooth? My guess would be the election part, to eliminate the confusion.
I would say, and it's one of the reasons that Manager Hoffman had requested at the last meeting, that in the event the repeal and reenactment fails, we really want the Title I question. That is top of the heap for all of staff recommendations. The other recommendations that staff feels strongly about is in Chapter 6, there's a rezone for individual lots by resolution instead of ordinance. And this comes up in situations where we have a huge land use application, and most of it's taken care of in one meeting, as far as the subdivision improvement agreement or the plat. And then you have this sort of hanging rezone that takes 2 meetings. We think it would be clearer to the residents. We think there's sufficient opportunity for engagement to have rezone also be by resolution at that same public meeting. Publication of ordinances in Chapter 6 that we've already talked about. The Personnel Merit Commission changes, that has a direct impact on how we manage our employees today. That's in Chapter 9. Municipal court, our presiding judge now supervises the staff in the municipal court. This updates her provisions in Chapter 10. And the last one, although this one is sort of more of a wish operationally, it's okay. IGAs are approved by 2/3 vote. Other contracts, even if the value of them far exceeds an IGA, only needs majority, we would bring IGAs in line with other contracts and have those be approved by majority. Those are staff's top 6.
Thank you very much. I would support those moving forward, but as we kind of heard from our community, there's no reason why we have to do all of this now. So I'm obviously, I'll hold that for discussion and follow my own rules. So thank you very much. So we got through the questions. Next is council's consideration of proposed ordinance number 2238 on first reading. Will the clerk please read the proposed ordinance by title?
Ordinance number 2238, submitting to a vote of the registered electors of the city and county of Broomfield at the coordinated election to be held on November 5th, 2024. A measure proposing a repeal and reenactment of amendments of the Home Rule Charter.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve ordinance number 2238 on first reading, order it published in full, and set the public hearing for July 9th, 2024? Councilmember Cohen.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Delgadillo.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Is that, oh, that is Councilmember Cohen. Your mic, that's okay.
There we go. Excuse me. I'd like to move to make a motion to amend ordinance 2238 to remove the term limits provision from Exhibit A and from the ballot question and direct staff to draft that as its own ballot question. If I could speak to that, or do you need a motion? Second.
First, you need a second. Is there a second? Councilmember Witten.
Seconded.
Okay, now is there any discussion on Councilmember Witten? Go ahead, you get to pitch it.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Cohen. We have a couple slides for
Okay.
Councilmember Cohen if we
Okay.
want to put that up. This is how it would change the ballot question. And then if you can show the next slide. And this is what would be the change in Exhibit A, just striking that paragraph C. So why don't we keep up slide 1 during the discussion? Thanks, guys.
Okay, any other discussion, did you, oh, you go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say that, when this first process began, I don't know, a year and a half ago, I did assume that we would have a flurry of ballot measures. I assumed there'd have to be several of them. But Councilmember Marsh Holston was quite convincing, whether he wants to admit it or not, that repeal and replace made a lot more sense to me, in that I'm sort of a get it done person. It made more sense in terms of practicality and expense. I think that if we repeal and replace, what we pull out term limits, which has a lengthy history of debate, would make the most sense to get all these changes, which for the most part are very much administrative, done at once, and not having to do the expense of probably 4 election cycles with 4 different sets of electors. Some of those elections will be city only. Some of those will be state elections with governor and senator on the ballot, and a variety of who knows what else will be on that ballot. And asking our citizens to review these various topics out of the charter a la carte without context to what else is in the charter. I think it makes it more sense, and I think the voters have the capacity to look at the whole document and judge it at once and see if they want to support it. If they don't, they can vote no, and if it fails, then we can go to Plan B and go measure by measure over the next 4 years and get the changes recommended in 2023 finally adopted by 2027. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I think my viewpoint would be, I think we can put this forward. It'd be much cheaper, much more practical. The voters have 4 or 5 months to review it. And if they vote no, we'll do Plan B, but if they vote yes, we've got this done and we can move forward. We don't have to keep educating people about the charter every single election cycle. And who knows what else will come up in that 4 to 5 years regarding the charter. So I believe this motion would leave the repeal and replace for the most part as it is. I'm sure there might be friendly amendments, but pull out the term limits, as I said, which has been a long-term topic of debate in this state, and allow a separate vote on that. So we would have 3 right there and then 3 measures on the ballot this fall.
Right, thank you. Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you. I didn't have any questions earlier. Take a quick moment here before we start to nitpick through here. There is a lot of things in here that are not going to go over well as one bundle. It's not just the simple administrative changes. So I'm not really in favor of trying to take a few things out, start here and see if we can, whittle down to something that we can put forward. I have a great fear that if we put this out as a whole, it doesn't pass, that we don't come back fresh the next year, we come back tainted. So I just want to go question by question. I will be voting against this and the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor. Can I make a friendly amendment to also exclude the mayor to, four-year term?
Sure. Oh, well.
Yes.
Councilmember Cohen. It's not my amendment.
That seems to be the other thing that sounded like was most controversial, so.
All right, is there a second to the, are you okay with that? And any, want a second, the friendly amendment? Councilmember Delgadillo?
I will second that.
Okay, we're moving back to discussion on the amendment and the friendly amendment now. Can you do a strike through of the, well, no. Thank you for the real-time updates.
Just to clarify, if we approve this, then we'll have 4 measures on the ballot for charter for this year, not counting if the whole repeal and replace went down, then you'd still have another 20 to get approved in the next couple of years. We're already filling up the ballot just already tonight, just as a point.
Mayor, could I get a clarification on that friendly amendment then?
Absolutely.
Councilmember Marshall, did you intend that the mayor's term limit would be created, would be its own separate question?
No, sorry, remove the 4-year term for mayor from the repeal and reenactment. I'm not necessarily. Mayor's term of office, yeah, I'm not necessarily married to whether or not it has to be this year or not, but just not the repeal and reenactment part. I'd be happy to put that one off to a future year or two.
All right, thank you.
And now we'll return to discussion.
Point of order, Mayor. So,
Sorry, yes.
so we had the amendment we had the amendment that was submitted by the deadline, but we have a friendly amendment that came at the dais. Does that count as being part of that initial amendment that was met the deadline, or is this amendment, in order to be introduced, now need 2/3 of council support?
So council's rules say that the concept of an amendment must be shared with the rest of council by noon on Monday. Whether or not this falls within the concept, it's the ballot question, but Mayor Pro Tem, if I understand your question, you're pretty much saying this is substantively different than what Councilmember Cohen had said. The determination on council rules is for the presiding officer and council. I can give you my opinion. If
I would
you'd
love your
like.
opinion, Ms. Rogers.
I think it's a different amendment. And I think it
I'm
needs
inclined to
2/3 vote.
agree. Okay. I liked hearing it from you, though. Okay, so that being said, does council have any way to suspend that, or is it my call?
No, so this would be an amendment from the dais, which requires 2/3 vote to be introduced to even get considered. So,
Okay.
so Councilmember Marshall has made a motion for this amendment. Councilmember Delgadillo has made the second. Now, you need to do a vote to see if there's 2/3. And to go to Councilmember Marshall's earlier question, this is 2/3 of council present.
Okay. There's 9 of us, so that's 6.
Yes.
Okay, so.
And that would be to just introduce it to have a formal vote on it. You're not voting on that,
Oh.
on the
okay,
mayor
that's
terms
right.
of office amendment right now.
So we're just getting it up for discussion. Got it. Okay, so shall I call for a vote to see if council wants to allow this for discussion?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Rogers. So we're going to vote on allowing Councilmember Marshall's amendment to an amendment for discussion. So council members, please cast your votes. All council members have entered their vote. And the results will be displayed. That does get the 6 vote threshold for discussion. So back to discussion?
Yes.
Okay.
And sorry, I'm trying to keep a timer of the new council rules on amendments and it's not working well.
Oh, my goodness.
So Jens, can you put back up that first slide again? Thanks.
All right, back to discussion. Councilmember Leslie, you have your button pressed.
Yeah, I have two questions. One, the timing of this being on the ballot. I mean, we haven't really discussed that yet, although several of us had said maybe we should slow down a bit. And so that needs to be resolved. And I'm hearing my colleague here say, well, that means there's 3 or 4 items on the ballot, separate items, but that's not necessarily so because we can decide good. And then secondarily, I don't know if these 2 amendments do it all. I think there's still some issues that may be perceived as still controversial and would kill the whole thing. So I don't think we're there yet. So.
All right, thank you for that. Mayor Pro Tem Shab.
Thank you, Mayor. So with the term limits amendment and the mayor's term of office amendment, this takes care of, I think, some big issues for residents who have spoken here tonight, as well as correspondence that we've received by email. But I do believe that there are other issues that still remain. What we're starting to enter into is legislating from the dais, and I don't ever believe that this is a good idea. I've learned this painfully in the past, and I don't want to continue that practice here tonight to start legislating this now. I do believe that my concern of the repeal and reenactment strategy is a very risky move by council. I do support, removing these two items if we do move forward with the repeal and reenactment, but I don't support the repeal and reenactment. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Lim.
I do not support moving forward with the repeal and reenactment. Removing 2 of these items does address some concerns of the community and of myself for that matter. But I agree that it would be better to bring forward these items individually for clear consideration by the voters. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So Ms. Rogers, do we need to vote on Councilmember Marshallson's additional amendment?
I think we vote on, because it was accepted by Councilmember Cohen as a friendly, so it's in there now. So
Okay.
this next vote is on this amendment. And just this amendment, you still have a chance to vote on the full ordinance.
It's a combo now?
It is. It's a combo
Okay.
with the removal, as it
helps.
shows on the screen, the removal of term limits and the mayor terms of office from the ballot question and from Exhibit A.
Got it. So was there some discussion left, Councilmember Anderson?
Oh, I was just going to say that I just basically ditto Councilmember Lim. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, so we are going to vote on the combination amendment to remove the term limits and the mayor's term of office from the bundle, we'll call it. 2238, okay, gosh, now I'm sorry. I just did. They called it the bundle. So
Mayor, I'm sorry, just to be clear, we are just voting on Councilmember Cohen's amendment at this
Got it.
point, as modified by Councilmember Marshallson.
All right, so we're just voting on the amendment. Any other
Just
discussion?
to
Councilmember
clarify,
Cohen?
it sets the term limit on the ballot separately. So repeal, replace, and then the term limits separately.
Yes, so that the
With-
full amendment is to remove term limits, remove the mayor terms of office from the repeal and reenactment, and to make term limits its separate question. That's the full amendment.
All right. So council members, anybody else before we vote? No? Okay, your button's still pressed. Thank you. Council members, go ahead and cast your vote for the amendment electronically. And all council members have entered their vote. And that passes 6-3. So is that enough? Okay, for the amendment. So now we return to the ordinance as amended, which will require a 7-vote threshold. of counts, not present of full council.
Yeah, it requires by state statute, which goes to, it's important what our charter references. It requires 2/3 of the governing body, which is a 10-member council.
All right, so council, we're going to go ahead. I'm sorry, I have comments. Councilmember Marshall Olson?
Thank you, Mayor. I've struggled with this one. I know I was the one that supported and advocated for the repeal and reenactment. I do think it's the simplest way. I still stand by that. But I have heard from the community. I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight and speaking. I also had many conversations over the last couple of weeks, coffees with residents, as well as social media interactions and comment discussions. I'm torn on this. I think efficiency and taxpayer dollars are important to do wisely, but I do hear the concerns that it is too much on one ballot question. I think we can get past that hurdle, but it would cost a lot of money on an informational campaign to really educate the voters on every single ballot measure. So I think I'm not going to support my own idea tonight, so. Thank you, Mayor. That's it.
All right, thank you very much, Councilmember Cohen.
In rebuttal, I just want you to imagine for the next 4 years, we're going to be debating charter amendments. And I think
I'm sorry, we only allow one person to speak at a time. It's not courteous for those trying to listen online, and I can hear the voices from the audience. So please refrain from sidebar conversations while someone has the floor. Thank you.
as I mentioned earlier, a large portion of these amendments or measures are very truly administrative as to internal audit or whether the city attorney can have risk manager under all these things that are fairly minutia. Government would just make for a better operation. I don't think it's too much to ask voters to look at a charter in toto, the whole thing, everything in context to what is changing. Otherwise, we're asking people every year to look at 4 or 5 isolated items that make minute little changes and say yes or no. And in the meantime, the city administration has to wait year after year for these small changes to come incrementally along that were all adopted, approved, recommended by the citizen group we asked to look at the charter, adopted pretty much in whole by this council. It said, yeah, this looks good. I don't think we're asking too much of voters to look at the charter in toto in its full context and adopt it. If they don't want to adopt it and vote no, fine, then we start Plan B in my mind. But there are 10 to 12,000 people who vote in our city elections. I don't think the interest is that minute out there for everybody else. I don't hear anybody talk about charter in the regular community. When you say charter in Broomfield, you're talking about a school in Broomfield. You're not talking about the charter amendment. It would take a tremendous amount of education each and every election cycle for the next 4 years, and probably more charter amendments will come up in the meantime. So I will just make case if I lose, it's fine. But I think this is more practical. It's definitely less expensive. And I think it taxes the voters in terms of, we talked about voter fatigue. I think this taxes the voters less than asking them to review 4 or 5 disparate measures every election cycle through 2027 or 28. That's it. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Nguyen.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to echo as well with Councilmember Cohen as well, just because, you know, this is a charter that has not been changed much throughout, unless when you count the amendments. And I do want to emphasize that I think a lot of the public being here as well, like, this is important. This is an important issue that I definitely think that the voters should have a say in. I think it isn't good governance to do multiple 15 to 16 to 20 votes, though. I think the voters can look at one charter review, and obviously I voted for the amendment to split up right now, and I think that's to try to compromise here. But I generally do think that we have to come together and see what is the best interest of how to good governance, how to make sure to be effective. And at the end of the day, this is a charter that's almost 50 years old. Something has to be done. Clearly, a lot of the language is outdated. And if we spend the next 5 years going over it, then, that's, so be it. But I'm still strongly for the full amended. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other discussion from council?
I was just going to say, this charter's older than you, Councilmember Wins.
All right, any other discussion from council? Okay, seeing no further discussion, we'll move forward with the vote on ordinance number 2238 as amended. I'll make sure we did the amendments. I want to read it right. Okay. Will the clerk please read the proposed ordinance by title? We did this. Oh, wow, this is long. Where? Okay, so we voted and seeing no further discussion, we'll move forward to the vote. There's a lot of language in here that's superfluous. All council members have entered their vote. The results will now be displayed on the screen. And that fails 4-5. All right, we have another one. I don't know if y'all want to hang out. So now we'll move on to next is council's consideration of proposed ordinance number 2239 on first reading. Will the clerk please read the proposed ordinance by title?
Ordinance number 2239, submitting to a vote of the registered electors of the city and county of Broomfield at the coordinated election to be held on November 5th, 2024, a proposed amendment to Chapter 3 of the Broomfield Charter to modify its election provisions to reference by Title I of the Colorado Revised Statute, the Uniform Election Code, rather than Colorado Municipal Election Law.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve ordinance number 2239 on first reading, order it published in full, and set the public hearing for July 9th, 2024? Councilmember Leslie?
I move the motion be approved.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Marshall.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf.
Thank you, Mayor. So again, this was one that was a high priority for staff. It was recommended for the 2024 ballot. We discussed this, or I asked a lot of questions about this. I got some clarification. So just a question now where we are with 2238 failing, this would be the only ballot measure moving forward. Do we still have the opportunity to put forth individual items for consideration?
Yes, if council gave that direction, we would just need to quickly prepare them so they would be approved by April 13th.
Okay, if council so desired to put forward some of those staff directions, when would be appropriate for that to happen? Would it be now during this vote, or would it be after this vote? Excellent, thank you. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Sure. Any other discussion? She meant August 13th, not April. That's okay. No, I knew she meant August, for the record. Any other discussion? All right, seeing no further discussion, we'll move forward to the vote on ordinance number 2239. Council, please cast your vote electronically. All council members have entered their vote and the results will be displayed on the screen. That passes unanimously 9-0. So thank you. So that ends this one. We're going to move on to our next item, which is a legislative summary.
Mayor.
Yes.
Go ahead, Councilmember. Oh, I was just going to follow up on what Mayor Pro Tem just mentioned, that if, given how the discussion went tonight, if there are other ballot questions council would like to consider as an ordinance, I would need that direction tonight to get those prepared.
Okay, I'll allow it. I wanted to get done with the meeting, but guess that's not going to happen. Okay, so who would like to make recommendations? Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to recommend that we put the term limit and mayor term of office on the ballot this year.
This isn't like motions and seconds. It's just you're making a list.
Continuation of the study
Do we-
session discussion, it would be general consensus direction.
Okay, is there consensus to put this on this year's ballot? Any objections?
Could I ask, is there a list now of all the,
Well, now I have to do a discussion round. So let's go to Councilmember Henkel.
Oh, are we discussing what Councilmember Marshall wants?
Yeah,
Is
we
that
have to
right?
take it to see
Okay.
if there's support for it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see why not. I mean, this is something, and I want to reiterate, not only for those people who came to speak, but also council members. This is what your charter review committee recommended. This is on their list. So it would be in vain on their work and their part. And we had a former city council member on there who was term limited, and he even said if he ran for, or if there was an option to run for third, he wouldn't. So people have the option to also not run for a third term. So there's just so many options. So why not give the option to the voters? If you're gonna withhold it from the voters, I think it's gonna be controversial this year. It'll be controversial then the next year. It'll be controversial the year after. Might as well put it forward if the Charter Review Committee put it forward as well. Thank you.
You just made me want to make a point of personal privilege because our term limits aren't real term limits. Because council members have sat out for a term and then they can run again after they've termed out. And it's happened with mayors, it's happened with council members. So they're not even real term limits when you think about it, like hard and, so it is kind of weird that.
Consecutive, yeah.
That's not a term limit to me if you can come back and run again. But that's another story for another time. Councilmember Delgadillo.
Thank you, Mayor. I do want to point out that we came up with a list of priorities during our study session. Shouldn't we default to that as opposed to trying to figure out a new list of priorities right now? And I thought staff got some direction on that. So I want to make that clarification.
No, I think you're right. And I appreciate you bringing that up.
Great, thank you. That was my only point, is that we should default to that instead of figuring this out right now in the heat of the moment. Thank you.
All right. Councilmember Cohen.
basically ditto, but I think we need all the options on before us, not just one by one, choose options to put on the ballot. So I think to Councilmember Delgadillo's point, there was a list.
Is there a list that's handy that we could display?
There wasn't finite, I don't think there's been decisions made about individual single topic ballot, was there? There were suggestions that they might be, or might have to be.
Yes, so during the May 21st study session, we did start talking about some priorities, and from about half of council, we got the ones that they would like to move forward. You also had staff's recommendation. I don't have that prepared on a slide, but some of the ones that consistently came up were city and county, that update throughout, vacancies, finance and budget, publication, court, personnel, and boards and commissions. And if you want, I can repeat staff's
Yeah,
priorities.
I thought staff had personal merit and some other, a different list.
Staff's priorities was the rezone by resolution in chapter 6, publication of ordinances in chapter 6, personnel merit commission, muni court, and the IGA vote in chapter 15.
Would help the discussion to make a motion that the staff measures would be on this fall's ballot, and we can debate that. Because otherwise, we're just going to be throwing things on the fire.
No, I don't disagree, but I think we need a visual so folks know what those are.
So maybe a 5-minute break for council city attorney to put a slide together.
Mayor, could we add this as a additional study session discussion on the 18th?
Sure, if council doesn't have a problem with that. Okay, we'll continue this to the 18th.
Thank you.
That works. Yeah, it's hard to do this from the dais, and it's not fair to folks watching. There's no transparency. You know, we need to publish it, make sure everybody has it. So I'm great with that idea. Thank you. And we can move on. Is that okay? Okay. Oh, I guess we do. Yes. Councilmember Anderson, would you like to make remarks?
So I was gonna suggest the high priority items, but now I'm just left curious if Ms. Rogers has all the information she needs to bring back everything that we think we might want to visit. I'm totally good to just stop right here if we feel prepared.
All right. Any other last discussion from council? All right, well, we're going to move on to the next agenda item and we'll see you guys back on the 18th. Taking our time. So thank you all, but you're welcome to stay, obviously. For our final item under action items, staff will provide council with a legislative summary of the 2024 Colorado General Assembly. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Thank you, Mayor. And Danae Brouillard is making her way down to the podium. Ms. Brouillard.
Right. This evening, we have prepared a debrief on the 2024 legislative session that will be broken down into 3 parts as outlined on the screen. The first portion will be a snapshot of the session via numbers. The second portion will be focused on the bills that council took positions on and the impact that they had on the city and county of Broomfield. And then the final portion will be a quick look ahead on what council can expect related to future legislative sessions and conversations. Next slide. All right, the 120-day session concluded in May with 705 bills being introduced. Governor Polis had until this past Saturday to complete any ceremonial signings desired and veto any bills. With the deadline passing, the session is officially wrapped up. Over the course of the session, council took formal position on 25 bills. Consistent with past practice, leveraging membership organization has been the most effective way to influence legislation. Although council is a member of several organizations, we focused on the 6 organizations outlined on the screen as these groups are the most active in the legislative space due to full-time lobbyists either on staff or on contract. To provide a comprehensive snapshot of the impact of the session to the city and county of Broomfield, we have included the dues for each organization in the presentation and memo. One change in this list from 2023 to the 2024 session is council rejoined Colorado Counties, Inc. Historically, staff does not provide full coverage of these membership meetings, including the subcommittee meetings, and instead join as needed based on agendas deferring to the appointed council members. In addition to the membership organizations previously just outlined above and council's appointments, staff participates in over 40 professional membership organizations as well. Although these organizations provide staff with more than just legislative support, many activate resources and communication during the legislative session, pending the bills in play. Next slide. To manage the session and advocate on behalf of the city and county of Broomfield's interest and the formal direction of council, staff spent over 1,300 hours over the 4.5-month span, breaking down to about 71 hours per week or 260 hours per month. And I would note that this is a conservative estimate. I mentioned earlier in the presentation that council rejoined CCI at the end of 2023, making this our first legislative session since rejoining. Throughout the session, staff attended the CCI meetings, which consisted of 3 4- to 8-hour meetings monthly, and staff also reviewed all of the agendas, providing council with summaries and the CCOB impact in advance of the meetings. It's important to note that this new process to accommodate the CCI membership increased staff time by about 200 hours. And in reviewing the summaries provided for the CCI agendas, 10 of 100 of bills that we reviewed, or about 10%, actually had impact on the city and county of Broomfield. This is due to the unique position Broomfield has, being a home rule authority, combined city and county authority, positions typically county elected, our full-time leadership staff, and Broomfield being DeBruce. Next slide. To talk a little bit about our impact, I put together just a visual. As I mentioned earlier, 705 bills were introduced. The sliver of 25 is the bills that council took a position on. And then I'm going to dive into in just a moment the 6 bills that Broomfield really had a significant impact on. Next slide. So here's a list of them, just outlining the way we were able to significantly influence these bills. And I'm not going to go through all of them. They're outlined here. Many of them are ones that we provided updates on throughout the session. Two that we hadn't captured before that I will just mention is the property tax bill and working to delay those changes to 2025. So the assessors had the time and the capability for technology updates. And then wanted to just highlight the public health agency funding increasing and give a shout out to Director Veiling and his efforts on that during the long bill portion of the session. Next slide. Now we'll talk about the bills with formal positions and the impact to CCOB. Next slide. As I mentioned earlier, council took formal positions on 25 bills. Of the 25 bills, 9 of them were lost, so you won't see them on the screen, as that means they didn't pass and will have no impact. Of the 14 that made it through, we have put them into the chart on the screen to capture the future impact to CCOB. For the 4 bills that are listed in the future action required by CCOB on the left side, you will see some of those items come in the future to update codes or make changes as needed to be in compliance with the new laws. And then of the 12 bills that are on the other side for minimal to no impact, so the right side of the screen, I would note that they could impact our residents or they may impact some of our nonprofit community partners, but they don't have a direct impact to CCOB as an entity, and that's why they're listed on that side. Next slide. And then finally, to just wrap up, we wanted to talk about the next step. So one more next slide and then we'll be done. There's been a lot of conversation with council over the session and at your focus session about coming back and talking about the legislative process and getting clarity and direction on how we proceed. So we have that scheduled for the July 2nd study session. So we'll bring that back for council's discussion and direction for the interim and legislative sessions moving forward. And that concludes the staff report.
Thank you very much, Ms. Brouillard. We'll now proceed with public comments, starting with in person. If anyone would like to be heard on this item, please come up to the podium, state your name and neighborhood for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem and council members and staff. Seth Patterson, Ward 1. I don't have any comment on the substance because I couldn't read it. Just kind of PowerPoint 101. The typeface needs to be bigger, and if there need to be more slides, so be it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that feedback. I can relate. Anyone else?
Good evening again, Mayor Pro Tem, Mayor and Council. Rick Fernandez from Broomfield Heights. Just a quick question. Shouldn't say enjoyed it. I appreciated the previous conversation when budget was brought up in terms of what is being spent. The question I would have, and I'd like to see a little bit of visibility on, is legislatively, what does staff spend in terms of time? What does staff spend in terms of actual dollars to, in my opinion, lobby for these items? I think it's important from a fiscal perspective for the community to understand that. I appreciate the perspective of this being done in a way for these bills to be looked at. 700 is a lot. I think it's too much, and I appreciate it getting narrowed down, but I still question the value that the community gets from lobbying for these things, for lack of a better term. So I'd like to understand a little bit better about what that amount was spent from a staff perspective and from a budget perspective. Thanks.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to be heard on this item? Anybody online? So we'll go to council questions and comments. Does any member of council have any questions or comments? Councilmember Marsh Holston.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had one question on a bill that it wasn't listed here, but the elections bill that passed, that got amended at the very end. Does that amendment affect our ability to run ranked choice voting election next year if we happen to have more than two people on one ballot?
We're still processing that amendment, but there's language in the amendment that said it only applies to state and federal ranked choice voting elections. So we've got to review different parts of that amendment. There's regulations that still impact our ability to run our own ranked choice voting, but it appears that that amendment language that was the subject of that news article does not specifically apply to our local ranked choice voting elections.
May I add, we don't recommend doing that. Being first out of the gate on ranked choice voting without the state having rules and SOS having oversight is not something that staff certainly and the clerk certainly would want to enter until the state provides some rules around that, which they have not.
But we've already established ranked choice voting. Just last year, we didn't have any elections that were more than 2. If we'd had an election last year with 3 candidates, we would have had a ranked choice voting election, right?
Danae, talk a little bit about that, if you would, please.
Sure. Councilmember Marshallson, I appreciate the question and it's incredibly complex. And I'm looking at Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf because we spent a lot of time on this bill and the 2-page amendment that was introduced at the last hour. So the bill he's referring to is Senate Bill 210, which was modifications to election law. It came at the end of the session from President Fenberg to primarily be a cleanup bill, and ranked choice voting kind of got lumped into there and was hidden until the last moment. And so with ranked choice voting, it's the multi-county or multi-seat issue. So other folks have done it with one position, for example, Broomfield with the mayor with one position. However, our situation looks different with 5 wards and a mayor potentially being triggered. So the rules haven't been developed there and it hasn't been applied. So that's the difference and the challenge. In addition to that, the other rules are around risk, the RLA, so risk limit auditing. And so we had deferred and hoped to have these rules by 2025, which is part of the conversation around 2023 and the holding pattern, as Manager Hoffman mentioned. So we had some guidance on the auditing for the election, and this now kicks the can again to January 1st of 2026. So the auditing rules that are to come from the Secretary of State are now kicked to 2026, and they defer back to the city and county clerk to develop, manage, and come up with a system.
It is not at all clear, but that's not your fault.
Yeah, it's very hard to, they all connect. So the long answer
Yeah.
to your question is we don't have the direction for auditing, and the can has been kicked another year.
So if next year we happen to have 3 candidates for 1 seat, we don't know if we'd be ranked choice or not?
We
Yeah.
wouldn't have the systems in place or direction
do
from the
that.
Secretary of State to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Hinkle.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I was a little bit scared about not having any sort of system for that. That's very scary to me. So I would love to have a system, especially for voting. I just wanted to thank you, Danae, for all of your work. Really, I had probably a 5-minute speech in my head about how much work you've done, and particularly your attentive detail to all the meetings I'm in with CCI, Metro area county commissioners. And so you know full well that now, not only are we city council members, but we also act as commissioners. And in those meetings, and we're fighting for dollars, there's times where people who are more seasoned than us will fight for dollars for their counties. And so I just wanted to praise your work because you've really kind of teased out what's important for Broomfield and what's not. And so like a lot of the health and human services, we kind of own a lot of that realm because we're so home rule. But I just really appreciate, the effect of, how this affects Broomfield. So I just really, really appreciate your work. Not only your work, but your time. You spent all the way up, I know you've had late nights at the Capitol too. So I really cannot appreciate that enough. So the second thing I wanted to say, I guess, or just ask is, it was in the agenda how much we spend on lobbying. So to answer Mr. Fernandez's question, would you mind just letting people know how much we spend? But then also, we've had a few bills in the past 2 years that have been very threatening towards Broomfield. And if we didn't fight for what we wanted locally, we would have lost a lot of local control. The state would have told us where to put our homes and where to put our roads. So that to me is just priceless. But would you mind telling us how much we spend on that?
Thank you, Councilmember Hinkle, because I apologize. It was clear off my screen and I missed it. If you could go to slide 4, please. And this is just a rough estimate looking at an average of staff that participated, but while we wait for that to pull it up, it was estimated at about 134,000. So taking those hours and estimating it of what that breakdown was. And you can see below the 108,000, that doesn't include insurance and benefits, but that's the city and county of Broomfield staff time that was spent on legislation. And that could include drafting memos, writing talking points, analyzing bills, kind of the gamut of things. And then to your question, Councilmember Hinkle, the 25,500 is the contract for Aponte Busam, who does our contract lobbying and really is the eyes down at the Capitol every day and letting us know when schedule changes and when bills are up and coordination from the Capitol.
And things can generally move really fast down there. There is some talk at the Capitol about possibly even moving the session instead of starting in January, maybe starting in February, starting later, and what that might look like as far as structure goes. You know, and other just there, I'm just going to say that there's other things that's been talked about. Are there things that didn't happen this year that we might see next year? And what that might look like? Has there been any talk about that from our lobbying crew, or what is just killed beyond all imagine and we will never see it again? But sometimes we just see bills over and over again. There has been some talk about instead of running 5 bills each, people have really said, let's do 3 bills each. All of these bills is just too much. And it's also, we see it at the Capitol too. There's too much alcohol drinking at the Capitol. It's causing a lot of stress amongst them all. So just the whole structure, I don't know if you've heard of anything like that about the structure possibly changing and or what bills we might see next year, because we did see a lot of local control bills come back and what that might look like for next year.
Councilmember Hinkle, to answer your questions, I think everyone's still processing the 2024 session. I haven't heard any specifics. I do think with the trade-offs with the administration around the GHG bills, there were agreement that those won't come back for a couple of years. So I anticipate the landscape will look different, but I haven't heard anything come into shape in a draft bill or conversation.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Councilmember Hinkle, if I may, your mayor is going to be at a legislative breakfast tomorrow talking about local control. So there was significant shift in local control that even out of the 71 staff hours per week or the 260, we did not make a dent in that. I think next year we will see construction defect, which was kind of the #1 goal this year that also didn't see any movement. That will certainly be coming up next year. I would, if I were a betting person, which I'm not, I would bet that there's no conceivable way that anyone in the Colorado legislature would agree to having less than 5 bills. And we, staff will be prepared to have a deeper conversation, as Ms. Brouillard had indicated, that the 134 is a very conservative estimate on how much time spent this year, which was unlike any other year. So I have to say that this year was generally, when you say anomaly, it means that it won't happen again. So on July 2nd, we're going to have a conversation with council about the number of lobbying organizations. Historically, CCI and CML's primary role and responsibility was prior to local governments really becoming actively engaged and involved in legislation. They were our advocates down at the Capitol. Over the last 10 years, and I'm sure Councilmember Nguyen will be able to attest to this, every single municipality now has their own lobbyists. It's a phenomenon now. So the roles of your once advocates, CCI and CML, I think they're really trying to discover as we move into the future what their advocacy and lobbying roles are. Now we have CCI, CML, CC4CA, CCAT, and a whole host of other organizations that are also lobbying. So on July 2nd, we'll have additional conversations about cost benefit ratio rate of return, and essentially across the board what the ROI is. So more to come on specific bills, on advocacy, on our role, so that staff can structure for next year, because we were not structured for this level of lift and impact this year.
No, I agree. And if you'll indulge me, Councilmember Anderson, I don't recall ever feeling so attacked as a local government as I have in the last 2 years. It's been like an adversarial relationship with the state as they're trying to consolidate more power at the state and in the administration's office and take away our local control. Councilmember Hinkle is right on. I mean, some of the draconian bills that they keep bringing up would fundamentally undo all of the work that we've done to solidify our own future by becoming a city and a county and a home rule, that we don't need the state for anything. Not really. We set our own future, and we've done a really good job of doing it. So I think the fight from a lot of local governments, a lot of the Metro Mayor's Caucus, we started lobbying. We never did before, but we were fundamentally against the overreach of the state that's been happening for the last 2 legislative sessions. They want to come in and tell us how to, plan our communities with no subsidy, with no financial help, and tell us to double the density here and build here. And it's wrong. It's not the Colorado way. And that's why I think I've invested a lot more time, along with a lot of my colleagues, to push back on the overreach. And that, we have our roles. Home rule charters were created because land use decisions should be local. They always have been, and they always should be. And the state preemption that just passed in 3 bills, people don't even know what hit them. My HOA doesn't realize now that any one of those homeowners can build an accessory dwelling unit. Every single one, despite what the covenants say, despite what the HOA prohibits, it doesn't matter anymore. The state passed that, so everybody can build a granny flat or a tiny house in their backyard, no matter what neighborhood. So that's, I think, a decision that should have been left to the local community, as it always has been. The parking minimums, that passed too. And then the transit oriented. I guess I'm tired. That transit oriented communities bill will force us to rezone 20 private parcels. That's hearings, that's notifications, that's a lot of work and a lot of lift to double the density in many of the transit areas by Arista and Interlochen. But we're stuck with that now. So that's why we lobby. That's why we have to stay vigilant, because they keep attacking our local government authority.
Also, to add to my thought too, yep, you're right, Mayor. And also what we're seeing too is that there isn't a lot of efficiencies happening. So we see lobbyists getting continually frustrated too. They'll see 3 to 5 bills and they all say the same thing. And so that's why they're saying, why aren't you guys talking before this is all happening? You guys need to consolidate some things. So we're seeing inefficiencies. We're seeing representation in DOLA now, where we actually don't have representation of the people. So there's a lot more pressure on DOLA to not represent the people, but they're going to move forward with approvals and things like that. So we just have concerns about that too.
All right, we're going to go to Councilmember Anderson now. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you. And I just want to share the appreciation for all staff's time. I want to share a slightly different view as someone who testified on bills that were ultimately lost on the calendar. We know from the past that some bills come back multiple times, and that these lay the ground and the foundation for something. And a lot of the work I did was around trying to bring us into ozone attainment for the health of residents. And so I don't see that as all that effort that we put into some of that testimony. I don't see that as a complete loss. But there's a conversation, and Councilmember Lim might have some more thoughts on this now or late at this next meeting. But at CC4CA, we're seeing more and more members abstain, which makes it, because we're trying to find, are we unit support, are you unit amend, are you opposing? And then when there's abstentions, it's harder to find that consensus. And also this discussion around how often does staff need to weigh in? How often can we take some of the work that these organizations are doing, and when and how we do take those positions, because if we don't take a position, we have to abstain, which then it's like, then where's the value? And so I love the idea that we're having this conversation about the value of the organizations and where do we put our focus? And then I'd also like to consider like, how can we as council make some decisions that are not like, when we go in and we're saying, we're not making these decisions saying that our staff has analyzed every possible outcome and they're ready to, look at every bill as it is amended, and more of a higher level view that we're not weighing in as an expert. We're just saying, in theory, this is good, laying on those organizations. So I would love to hear more of that conversation. And also, I share the mayor's concerns, and it felt more like if it's every year, it feels more like we're fighting more than we're just trying to keep that local control than we're actually gaining. So it's getting to be quite disappointing. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other council member comments, discussion? No? Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf.
Thank you, Mayor. So, knowing that we have a study session item coming forward concerning the future legislative sessions on July 2nd, I think that, as we prepare for that, I think that we need to ensure that we create a system that is fiscally responsible with significantly less staff resources dedicated to our state legislation, that isn't pulling our staff away from the Broomfield needs and sidetracking to these conversations about state legislation that may or may not pass, and that are very different conversations than what we're having here on Broomfield. I believe that we need to have all of our current organizations on the table, that we fully understand how these organizations function, how these are duplicative of one another, and that's just our council organizations, and fully understanding our staff organizations, how our individual staff members are assigned, or not assigned, but they're volunteering on these other boards, and how those are interfacing with these council organizations, making sure that we understand the outside contracts and how that interfaces with our own staff, legislative people, and ensuring that we are clearly focused on the impact of Broomfield first. So I think that as we prepare for that conversation, it would be good to really kind of make sure that we come in prepared for all of that to be on the table, but really to be ensuring that, our primary goal is our number one community goal, which is, fiscal sustainability, and that we are ensuring that our staff are able to focus on their Broomfield jobs first. So thanks, Mayor. That's all I have.
All right, thank you. Any other comments from council? All right, well then, thank you so much, Ms. Brouillard. Take a breather and we'll regroup on this later. The final item of business for council's consideration this evening is my request for future action for adopting a flag policy. I want to remind council this is not a discussion on the topic, and instead the opportunity for council to provide staff direction on whether or not council desires staff to dedicate time and resources to this request. I brought this forward because I've received public comment asking us to revise or change our flag policy, but the reality is we don't have a flag policy. So I think for clarity, we need to consider creating one. Erie passed a policy by their city manager. We can either provide direction to the manager to formalize a Broomfield policy, or we could pass a resolution formalizing the policy. So we'll go to public comments.
John E. Walt, Pinnacle North. I wasn't prepared for anything to actually speak because I didn't think we could comment on this, but thank you very much for bringing this forward, Mayor. I think it's going to be a good conversation to have. And I mean, we fly flags for a reason, so we should have an understanding of why they're out there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else?
Roxy Jewell, Lockmore. Excuse me. The policy would be a good thing for people to understand, so that if a flag is in Ward 1, then it should be expected to be in Ward 5 if it's in Ward 5, it should be expected to be in Ward 1, not just pick and choose where it's going to be flown. It should be throughout the whole Broomfield community. So that is one thing to think about too. We are a community. Our American flag is our #1 flag, and it always has to be above any other flag that's being flown out there on a government building or government facility. So that would be the only thing you're going to have to put into your rules or regulations or whatever you end up wanting to call them. But don't segregate one community from another. If you're going to do it in one, you do it in all.
Thank you. Anyone else? Online, but I'm pretty sure. No. Okay, so we'll go to questions from City Council. Councilmember Marshall Olson.
Thank you, Mayor. I support bringing forward a resolution for council to approve.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf.
Ditto what Councilmember Marshall said.
All right, thank you. Is anybody opposed to bringing forth a resolution to create a flag policy? So it's clarified? You agree on it? Okay. Well, then I guess we have direction.
Mayor, and we'll model it off of what Erie has produced and
Okay.
then let council modify from there.
Okay,
Sounds
sounds
good.
like a good draft starting point. All right, well then, thank you all so much. We have direction. Is there any other business to come before the council from my colleagues or staff? Seeing none, the council meeting is adjourned. Good night.